Morning.
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 Ready to go.
You
Ready to go.
World. Hello,
Stand
world.
by.
Happy Saturday.
Stand by for open, gentlemen.
Standing by for open.
Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, The Ticket, presents the KeyBank Countdown to Kickoff.
How much you pay for your seat, Sam?
Yeah, no kidding.
The Michigan Wolverines are back on the gridiron today, looking to bounce back from their bitterly disappointing loss to Michigan State 1 week ago. The team regressed on
That looks
offense.
like the
There were
alumni
coaching errors
seats
and
to pay the
execution
big
mistakes
coin
in
to
Game
sit.
2 that were not there in Game
told
1.
Sam it was not
Can
gonna be
they
hard to find a
regroup and get
empty
back on
picture
track
from
in
Memorial
Game
Stadium.
3?
I wonder
The
if Phil
defense was
Glass got
exposed.
the
There are coaching and
recliners
execution
for the
deficiencies
end
that need to be
zones, you know,
mended or
for the-
masked. Can that side of the ball
the
show
suites,
dramatic
the
signs of
recliners,
improvement
you know, like the
in just
NFL?
1 week?
Isn't John
We start
Cougar
to get
Miller
answers to
one
those
of their
questions and more starting at noon today.
For
It's the
Indiana?
Michigan Wolverines versus the Indiana
I
Hoosiers.
can't hear you, Sam.
Today is the first
I
November
said he
game
isn't
day
John
in the
Cougar
Big
Miller
Ten.
one of their people.
Oh, yeah. John Cougar is in Indiana.
Live from Saline,
Here we go,
Ypsilanti, and Ann Arbor,
Long
Michigan.
time.
This is the KeyBank Countdown to Kickoff with Ira Weintraub,
They were
Sam Webb,
bad.
and Steve Clarke. The 1-1 Michigan Wolverines are back on the road for a matchup with the ranked Indiana Hoosiers. Kickoff from Bloomington
My
is at
level's
noon.
good, man.
But first,
Turning my
get
mic
ready
up.
for the game with the
Good.
KeyBank
Yeah,
Countdown
you
to
guys- all three of you guys
Kickoff.
sound
Brought
good
to you
on
by
my end.
KeyBank. Powered by Bud Light.
should be all
Driven by
solid to
Brighton
go.
Ford and supported by Wolverine Rental and Supply. On the official voice of Michigan Sports. Sports Talk 1050 WTKA. The Ticket. And on Ticket TV. Now, here's your host for the KeyBank Countdown to Kickoff, Ira Weintraub.
Live on radio in 5, 4, 3.
Good morning. Welcome to the KeyBank Countdown to Kickoff on Sports Talk 1050 WTK, The Ticket, and on Ticket TV. I'm here in Saline at my house. Sam is at home in Ypsilanti, and Steve Clarke is at his home. Actually, not that far from me. I can kind of wave that direction and say hi to Steve Clarke. The KeyBank Countdown to Kickoff is brought to you by KeyBank, powered by Bud Light, driven by Brighton Ford, and supported locally by Wolverine Rental. You can hear us on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket and watch us on Ticket TV on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and WTKA.com/countdown. If you go there, you can enter to win prizes from Bud Light and Brighton Ford. And guys, no procrastinating. Let's get right into it. I don't want to say any bad language. We're going to what happened last week. Michigan State 27, Michigan 24. I guess I should first say good morning. How are you? Happy Saturday. And then I will ask you for the good, the bad, and the ugly. First, just good morning. Happy Saturday, Sam and Steve.
Good morning. It's a great morning. Any morning you wake up corona free these days, right? Is a good morning, but it's also a good morning because they get a chance to get out on the football field and exercise some demons, get the bad taste out of their mouths, and we get a chance to watch them do it. Hopefully, it was as big an upset as I've seen in the 20 or so years, close to 20 years I've been covering the team. It's right up there, in my opinion, with App State as far as significance is concerned. I mean, some people say it was worse than App State because App State was a better football team than that Michigan State team that Michigan just lost to, and they were a 1AA team. But still, the 3-touchdown favorite go into a game. They're looking to get off the schneid, so to speak. In a couple of regards, new regime for Mel Tucker. Got beaten by Rutgers the week before, a terrible Rutgers team. A chance for Michigan to really stomp on their throats. And they didn't. And you saw an instance where it was not, as I've been saying, it was not a fluke. It was not referees being over lenient to one side. I know there was some criticism of the lack of allowed physicality on the outside. Some of those would have been penalties, no matter how loose you were with the call on the perimeter. And plus, Michigan got some beneficial whistles as well, but never really an adjustment to what Michigan State was doing to them down the football field. So that was a piece. So you got outplayed and you got outcoached in that regard. And then on the offensive end of the floor, never could really find the consistency that they found the week prior. It was true that Michigan State won the battle in the trenches, but that wasn't the story of the game on offense to me. It was a team whose level of execution went down dramatically from Minnesota to Michigan State, and not and not because of anything that Michigan State was doing. Again, I'm talking about the lack of execution part. There were aspects of the game where Michigan State, in times of the game where Michigan State just pushed them around and beat up on them. But if you go back and watch that film and you see the number of times where a guy ran the wrong way or blocked the wrong guy or just missed the block, a lot of the plays that Michigan experienced in the first half were able to capitalize on in the first half. They left those plays on the football field, and it wasn't just one guy. It wasn't just one position. I mean, Joe had an okay game. He wasn't great. He wasn't terrible, but he wasn't great. Didn't see the field as well as he did against Minnesota. One of those instances where they looked in game 2 like I thought they were going to look in game 1, and he was not yet ready to carry the offense. He needed some execution around him, and for him to complement it, and that just wasn't the case in week 2. Steve, hopefully it's the case in week 3.
I think you summed that up really good when it comes about what you expect to see in week 1 versus week 2. I disagree with the fact that it was about as bad as losing to App State, but the ramifications of losing to Michigan State probably is much worse. You look at a situation where Michigan could have won 3 in a row, 4 out of the last 5. And if you take away that stupid kick, punt, whatever that was at the end of 2015, you're looking at Michigan having a 5-1 record against Michigan State. Now, the ramifications are that Michigan State is 3-3. They've done this before. They've got instant credibility where they absolutely had none going into this game. And I think kids notice. I think kids notice after a while. The kids today who are choosing a university hasn't seen Michigan dominance over Michigan State in their lifetime. Mm-hmm. And that's what a Michigan fan is looking for, dominance over your rival. Now, Ohio State is one thing, and that's, a stepladder really high to achieve. But beating Michigan State on a regular basis should not be an issue with this Wolverine football team or as a program. And it clearly is. And I think that's why this loss was so devastating. And Sam, I'm sorry that you had to go through the film room, but I want to give you one of these.
Man, it's funny you say that because, Al Borges, who is a really, really good dude to watch the game with, because he informs analysis the way Ira, you would say, like Marcus would, right? It's one thing you can know the game, you can have played the game at a certain level, but it's different when you're in it with a guy who has coached or played at a high level. They see little things that you don't recognize off the rip. So it informs the analysis in a way that just you don't get elsewhere. So it is a huge resource, but there's a difference, man. Like he's Sunday. Hey, he's sending me messages like, hey, did you get up off the ground? Yeah, let's get to it. I'm like, man, I'm in shock. I'm not ready to go over any film right now. Then he sends me a message in the afternoon. Do I need to call the paramedics for you? I couldn't watch that film till Monday. Al had already been through it. Like, man, it's that surgical approach that I guess you have when you're a coach. Now I don't quite have. And so it's tough, but as you get into it, as you get into watching the film and you understand the why, on one hand, it leads to, strangely, a little optimism. And on the other hand, it leads to a little bit of doubt. The optimism piece is you watch the film, you see the number of mistakes that they made on offense, and you say, I can see how that can get better just with time. Now, injury could affect things. We'll get into that a little bit later on in the show. But just watching the number of miscues, especially seeing it the week after they didn't have all those miscues. And when I say this, it's important to know that I'm not talking about, a guy got off a block. No, I'm talking about running the right way, going the right direction, blocking the right guy. That's not opponent specific, unless you're talking about the kind of pressure you feel during the game. And so to see those kinds of mistakes to see Joe in that game not see the field quite as well as he did against Minnesota, and that maybe be a pressure of the moment thing. You can say, all right, with time, that can get better. My real question about this game after that, to see if they have their composure and they're back to execution on offense, defensively, what kind of strategic adjustments will they make, Steve? Because I don't think that what ails them defensively is just about guys having poor technique on the football field.
Yeah, once again, we don't meet and talk about this before the show, but Sam and I are on the same page with this one. It was deja vu to me with the secondary. Our corners were consistently beaten on deep throws, and that never really changed. It's sort of a fait accompli at this point that adjustments don't seem to be made at a tangible value. Does this mean Michigan's corners are the worst in Big Ten? No, not at all. But they're not ready to be on an island all game long. And it's done this way so that Michigan can blitz and create havoc around the quarterback. And as Rocket Lombardi found out, he didn't get sacked. He never turned the ball over, which was, quite a difference between last week and the game at Rutgers on the opening day of the season.
Well, here we are, guys. This moving on now, 1-1 on the season. A lot to learn from these last couple games, so we'll continue to talk about what happened last week as we move forward to the next game, which is today, the 69th meeting between Michigan and Indiana. The Wolverines lead the series all-time 59-9. We all know the run that Michigan's on, including playing in Bloomington last year, which was a 39-14 Michigan victory. But a lot of the games in the last decade or so have been really close, high-scoring type, overtime. We've seen all those kind of games. The last time these teams played each other when they were both ranked was 1988. Michigan actually won that game 31-6 here in Ann Arbor, or a revenge game from the year before. And Steve Clarke, I'm sure you remember the history of this game in 1987, the last time both of these teams were ranked, and they played in Indiana. And that one was number 15, Indiana 14, number 20, Michigan 10. Indiana had the 14-10 victory back in 1987, the last time the Hoosiers have won a game in this series.
So in 1987, the game wasn't even on television. You had to listen to it on radio throughout the whole deal. It was a cold, blustery, windy day. I could tell you a lot more about it, but I'm going to save you the agony. 1988 was a lot more fun because the two teams were ranked, and Leroy Horde, who we had part of on Fantastic Friday during my stint, ran a couple of long touchdown runs against Indiana in a game that was a bit of a walk for Michigan. But that game in itself is what started me into start taping a lot of these games, because Michigan at that point went on to, win 5 straight Big Ten consecutive championships. Your mute didn't work. 5 straight Big Ten five
way to go, dogs.
10 straight championships. Was one highlight reel after another, and it's what inspired me to keep, taping all these games and then going back and looking at them. I still have them today. Unfortunately, I have a really small television that isn't hooked up for DVDs to be able to play them in my background today, but normally I would.
All right, that should fix my microphone now, and hopefully the dogs won't bark as they I'm home alone. I say hi to my wife and daughter who are watching down in Orlando right now. And so I have 2 dogs that I have no idea what they're going to do over the next 3 hours. But if people walk down the street, we're going to have a couple extra hosts with us throughout the Key Bank Countdown at Kickoff here on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket. Coming up next, we picked the winners for today's slate of games in the Big Ten, plus 2 big games from elsewhere around the country. We actually have big games from elsewhere around the country that we want to talk about. So we'll get to those next. Stay with us. This is the Key Bank Countdown at Kickoff, live from Saline, Ypsilanti, and Ann Arbor on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket and on Ticket TV.
Clear.
Thank you, man. Wow, lots of good mornings to say. Good morning to wasn't last night the feast? What's up, Altruda? Wasn't last night the feast? Hope that went well for you. You got Garrett this morning watching, bounce back week. There's my wife down in Florida, and we got another Orlando right there. And here's Adam. Man, I don't even know where Adam is living anymore. Adam, old friend of mine, he's been working with the Air Force for years, and I'm not sure where he is now. Used to live in the Maryland area after going to Michigan. What's up, Adam? How you doing? Hi, Octane Mike. He wants your booze collection, Steve.
Well, the funny thing is, he could probably have it because I don't drink a whole lot of that.
Well,
I have yet to crack the
depends
bottle
on how
that
the
you
season
gave me.
continues.
Miz will test, and
Yeah. I have yet to crack
Addison,
that bottle yet.
I gave away some free stuff to them.
And all I had to do was just pick a bottle. That was it.
David down in Ohio. How are you?
David says he watched the game 3 times this week. What?
No, I think he watched it Sunday and then 3 more times. So he's actually watched it 4 times additionally.
Thank you. What? I mean, who is he? Kevin Bacon? Thank you, sir. May I have another? I mean,
yeah, that's a lot. What's up, Ed Davis?
Yeah, that's what's up, Ed. That's like Al watching the game. Like, man, look, I'll watch it once myself after, watch it live. I'll watch it one more time myself and one more time with Al as we go through the film, but I'm not watching it.
Sheldon.
Over.
Atlanta.
That's what coaches have to do, Sam.
Yeah, I hear you.
That's what.
Good morning, Richard. Ready? Are you ready for football?
Yeah.
They probably start.
You just made Richard's morning this.
Late Saturday night. Are you doing the Macho Man?
Rich Reddy loves Miz's Macho. Sam, you missed it on Tuesday, and he put in a bit about Miz doing the Macho Man, and before he knew that Miz was going to be with me on Tuesday, and so he got some bonus Miz Macho Man, and yeah.
I used to do the Macho Man it was a good imitation. I used to be able to do a good imitation of the Macho Man, Randy Savage, and it's been a while. But if
have a Slim Jim, you'll be all right. You'll be able to do it.
If I ever resurrect it, we should have Rich Reddy and myself on together as Macho Man talking to Macho Man.
See, I don't remember.
Miz is the Macho Man. Miz is the guy. If you can do a Miz version of the Macho Man, then you are. Hello, John down in Wilmington. Glad you came out of the game. It's been a long week.
Yeah, it has been.
It's been a long week. I mean, I know Sam personally's had a long week. There's been a long week. Good morning, Tim.
He said, "Oh damn, Miz shaved."
Yeah, it's Movember, Sheldon.
It's Movember. Sheldon, when Miz came in the studio, no, was it on the studio? It was the studio
it was Tuesday,
it was Tuesday morning, and Miz came in the studio, and I like rubbed my eyes. Or is it?
It was Tuesday because I didn't get a chance to do it Monday, so I did Monday night. But yeah,
it was. He came in, I was like, wait, yeah.
My face was a combination of hot and cold at the same time. Cold because of the air, hot because of razor burn. So, all right, we're back.
And what Miz can tell you, because if you've seen the Miz with us these last few Saturdays, he can tell anybody if they want to know the difference of wearing a mask with a big beard and then with a clean shaven face and how different it feels.
It's like Velcro now. All right, guys, back on radio. Stand by and
Miz, say hi to Gracie.
Hi, Gracie.
You need some Estee Lauder.
Yeah. I need some beard balm. See for some Miracle Grow.
Rob, Go Blue in Wapakoneta, one of my favorite towns in Ohio. I love saying the name.
Here we go. Back in radio in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Win the ultimate Bud Light Victor's Lounge tailgated home package, courtesy of our friends at Bud Light. It's easy. Just go to WTK.com/countdown and click for your chance to win. It's the ultimate Bud Light Victor's Lounge tailgated home package, courtesy of our friends at Bud Light and your friends here at Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket. This is the KeyBank Countdown to Kickoff. We are brought to you by KeyBank, powered by Bud Light, driven by Brighton Ford, and supported locally by Wolverine Rental. And guys, we have, in addition to our game, there were 2 co-hosts chiming in there. We have 6 total Big Ten games today. Michigan is one of them. We'll get to that one later. There would have been 7, but Purdue-Wisconsin was canceled, and that could impact Michigan next week. That's something that we're going to be watching all week long. But let's pick the games in the Big Ten this week. And, guys, we've got Michigan State at Iowa at noon. So, of course, Iowa's in the game, so we start with Steve Clarke.
The Spartans are going to face a dramatically different defense that relies backs that stay in coverage, plays solid fundamentally. It would be totally in character for Michigan State to look bad the following week after a big win against Michigan, wouldn't it, Sam? But Iowa has its own problems. They're 0-2, both close games, all of the offseason news that they've had. You look at the individual matchups, and the one thing that I'm just not on the bandwagon is their quarterback. Spencer Petras has 1 touchdown. He has 3 picks. He doesn't appear to be a second-half quarterback at all. He is not Nate Stanley. And their best receiver, by the way, Amir Smith-Marset, he's been suspended. So it's just for a game, but he's been suspended. They're going to have to rely on their 2 good packs in Makari Sargent, Tyler Goodson to carry the day. You know what? I'm just going to I didn't make a decision until right now. I'm going to go with State.
Yeah, as much as I hate to say it, I mean, this is not the Iowa team that we are accustomed to seeing. I mean, 0-2 start. Part of me wonders whether the offseason turmoil with the program, not just this team, but with the program, whether that carried over into the season, whether if there was a disconnect, whether there's discord among that or on that roster, sort of kind of transferring over into the on-field portion.
Speaking of transferring, Sam, I mean, there's a lot of players going into the portal over the last couple of months, more so than normal. Now, I don't think any of those guys that are in the portal are starters or key reserves, but I just kind of noticed that there seem to be a lot of them hitting the portal in a short period of time, in a period of time where you wouldn't expect to see as many hit the portal.
I think it's important for Iowa to get off to a good start, but see, they've been a terrible second half team. I mean, they've lost a couple of close games because they can't do anything in the second half. And as you pointed out, Steve, their number one receiver out for this contest. Michigan State, meanwhile, after giving up 5 sacks and turning it over 7 times in week 1, they were able to protect their quarterback. Rocky Lombardi has a little bit of confidence. I think they're going to be the better running team in this game. Iowa hasn't been able to run the football as effectively as you like. I just think you got to go with Michigan State in this game, as much as it might pain us to say. I think a little Spartan momentum is going to carry them to victory in this one.
You know, and the thing is, Sam and Ira, is that we don't always pick favorites. I mean, Iowa is a touchdown favorite in this game, and we're both picking Michigan State.
Well, if anyone's been paying attention, road teams are 7-6 this year. In the Big Ten, obviously, road games, it does have a big changes the environment. So right now, road teams are 7-6 in the 13 Big Ten games through 2 weeks.
Who won at home last week? Did anyone win at home last week? I don't think anyone won at home last week. I didn't mean to have dead Paul on the radio.
You just put us all on the spot, but let's see. No, Maryland won 45-44 at home, and they were the only Big Ten team to win at home. I should have known the answer. The Maryland win that they pulled out in overtime on that Friday night game. So no Saturday winners at home. So there's your answer, Steve. Northwestern at home against Nebraska at noon today. Sam Webb.
Yeah. So look, I said at the beginning of the season that this would be, it's still early in the season, obviously, but that this would be a bounce back year for Northwestern. You know, nowhere could you find a good game last year on offense for Northwestern. Always a tough, gritty defensive team, but just terrible quarterback play. I mean, going to the portal to get a 5-star quarterback. I mean, you're supposed to have talent there, and it just didn't work out. They went in the portal. They got Peyton Ramsey, and he has been the answer for them. A veteran guy, a guy who can make plays with his legs as well, gives them a rudder offensively, and Northwestern's back. Now I'm a believer. As I look at that side, Steve Clarke, you look at what's happened with Wisconsin, with COVID. You look at Minnesota looking like they're circling the drain. Who's going to rise? Steve Clarke, Northwestern.
Right. Absolutely. I think Scott Frost is really still bitter about the Cornhuskers being denied a chance to play Tennessee Chattanooga. And, anytime that I see a bitter and chapped Scott Frost, it's second only to a Scott Frost that is beaten, defeated, and conciliatory. So, hey, I got number 2 on my list so far. Nebraska thinks they're good, and that's what I'm amused by. There were certainly positives in a 35-point loss to the Buckeyes, but they still think they're good. And Northwestern has a better defense and enough offense to get the win in this one. Northwestern.
All right, guys, 2 games at 3:30. There were 3, but there's 2 games at 3:30 on different BTN channels. One of them, Steve Clarke, is Maryland coming off of their win over Minnesota at Penn State, coming off their loss to the Indiana Hoosiers.
Character counts, and we'll see what Penn State is made of after they were effectively wiped out of the divisional race after just 2 losses in 2 games. Could they win out? Yeah, I think it's quite possible. Could the same thing happen to Ohio State as it's doing to Wisconsin? Yeah, it's possible. But take a look to see if Penn State goes through the motions in a victory over Maryland, beats them by 28, or more on the way to playing for pride and taking Maryland off the field.
Yeah, you look at Maryland, and there is obviously some optimism. I mean, they have their own Tagovailoa, who put up some big numbers. Problem was he put those numbers up, as we found out, with Michigan, put those numbers up against a really, really porous defense. And it's going to be a night and day occurrence between what he saw with Minnesota and what he's going to see this week with Penn State. They can get after the quarterback. I think that's going to be an issue for Tagovailoa today. I think Penn State wins by a huge margin today. I think, you're coming off a disappointing loss to Ohio State, but I think you look around and you felt like Penn State wasn't, they weren't out of their league for a portion of that game. I just think Maryland is going to be in this contest and it's going to look like that. I think Tagovailoa is going to be running for his life all day. I think Penn State scores in the upper 30s and wins this comfortably today.
The other game, Sam and Steve at 3:30 is Minnesota at Illinois.
Yeah, I just
Sam. I don't want to say Illinois. It was Illinois Sam. I got to separate my Illinois and my S there.
Right. So two teams with really high expectations heading into the year and haven't lived up to what we expected them to be. For Minnesota to, even with it being a shootout, I mean, I knew, and Steve, you and I had a conversation in week one about how much Minnesota really missed Antoine Winfield. It is as big a loss to graduation or, departure for the draft as there is in the league when you talk about impact on a unit. But even with that porous defense, you expect them to go out and be able to outscore teams. And they weren't able to outscore Maryland. And you look on the other side, a lot of expectation for this Illinois team to really build on what they did last year, returning starter and Brandon Peters. Now, again, COVID affected. Was it in relation, Steve, to the Wisconsin game? No one really knows. But this is not a team that's going to be able to win games without Brandon Peters or win games without Brandon Peters playing at the level we saw him play at last year. So you find yourself saying two teams with struggles, not living up to expectations. Who can you point to? I'm going to go with the team that has the more proven quarterback. I'm going to go with Tanner Morgan in this contest and believe that he's going to be able to quarterback his team to victory against a defense. Most teams are playing defenses that aren't that good. I think Minnesota's going to have enough to get it done today.
Sam, it's not just Brandon Peters. COVID-19, contact tracing, and injury has taken Illinois' top three quarterbacks out for this matchup. They nearly beat Purdue with their fourth-string quarterback. Meanwhile, Minnesota's defensive coordinator has COVID-19, and he won't be coaching in the Minnesota-Illinois game. Not that it really mattered. Advantage? Illinois, fourth-string quarterback over missing Minnesota's defensive coordinator. No, but despite that, despite the free and easy gimme comedy line, I really do expect the Gophers to make a few more plays in a high-scoring shootout that they couldn't do against Maryland, and therefore I'm taking the Golden Gophers.
All right, guys, there's one night game in the Big Ten tonight at 7:30. It is Rutgers at Ohio State on the Big Ten Network, and I know you guys are both taking Ohio State. If you have any other comments you have to throw in, feel free.
No.
Sam shakes his head no.
I will just very quickly that I have some empathy for Rutgers beat writers. I mean, James Cratch, I think, summed it up the game's best. Rutgers is going to look a lot more competitive this year against Ohio State, but they're going to lose by about the same amount of points. So what are you really saying?
What does that mean?
Well, what it means is, in the overall picture, you're still a dud, but I mean, it's a better dud.
I said, I use this analogy often. If you have a pile of dung and you spray potpourri on it, it's still a pile of dung, Steve. Just it might just have a little aroma to it, a little less pungent.
Sam, it's called bleep in a rose bush.
There you go.
Bleep in a rose bush.
So what
they're going to get destroyed.
Just for curiosity's sake, you know what the average margin of victory between Ohio State and Rutgers is since Rutgers joined the Big Ten?
No idea.
45. 45 is the average margin of victory for Ohio State over Rutgers in their entire lifetime. Big Ten play.
And I think the over-under in the game is give or
38.
take.
Over-under. I'm sorry.
Over-under. I'm seeing the spread is 38.5. Yeah, I'm seeing 38.5, 39. So you guys both would take give the points. Yeah. I know. That's what I usually do. Is I usually throw. A couple years ago, this line was like 50 something. Maybe it was last year. All right, guys. There are two games nationally. Games from around the nation that actually are of significance. The first one is at 3:30. It's probably going to be a very unique version of the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. Florida versus Georgia at 3:30 on CBS down in Jacksonville. But it's a very big matchup, Steve, in the SEC East. Huge matchup in the SEC East.
Yeah, there's a quarterback controversy in Athens, too, where Kirby Smart has publicly backed a young man named after a cologne. Why the controversy? Because Stetson Bennett has thrown 5 interceptions over the past 2 games, ranks 8th in the SEC in quarterback ranking. And that is, you've heard of a delayed blitz. That is a delayed laugh from Sam Webb. That's what happens.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I'm glad somebody's reacting. Again, he ranks 8th in the SEC in quarterback rating. The team is 11th in red zone efficiency. 4 starters on defense were knocked out of their last game against Kentucky last week. A preseason All-American cornerback got into a motorcycle accident. Meanwhile, Florida, they haven't scored less than 38 points per game. Turnovers make the difference in this one. I think the Gators chomp on the dogs in an upset in the SEC East.
Well, you started out talking about the biggest difference in this game. Stetson Bennett, is a great story. Walk-on family, a diehard Georgia fans. How many stories do we have to see about how his family, they never could have imagined in their wildest dreams that Stetson would be quarterbacking the Georgia Bulldogs, the team that he leaves and he comes back and he's the guy. We every week the story is regurgitated. My goodness, it's a great underdog story, but it does not amount to victory. Not in a game where Kyle Trask is looking like, to me. Is he? I've seen this comparison be made with how he's looking this year on several broadcasts and several pundits. But is he this year's version of Joe Burrow? Kyle Trask is putting up big numbers. I think the stat that I saw is through to this point, he's put up more yards than Joe Burrow through as many games last year. I just think the disparity between the signal callers is too great to think that Georgia is going to be able to win this one. I think that Florida wins, maybe not with the margin that Bama did, but Florida wins this game, and I think they're going to win comfortably today.
And guys, the other game nationally, it's a very unique version of this matchup. Clemson at Notre Dame at 7:30 on NBC. And obviously, when we first saw that this game was going to be there and you knew Notre Dame was playing pretty good football, big hype. And the hype is still there. But needless to say, Sam, Trevor Lawrence is not playing. It changes the complexion. But I'm assuming that a Clemson loss in this game, but if they run the table and then with Trevor Lawrence beats Notre Dame in the ACC championship game, their season does not get derailed. But this is a pretty big game to have Trevor Lawrence out again. He should be back in time for next week's game, but he's out tonight.
DJ Uiagalelei. Did I say it right, Steve?
Close. I'm having a tough time having it roll off the tongue, but you could think of it as Uiagalelei.
Uiagalelei? Uiagalelei.
Yeah.
Okay, DJ Uiagalelei. I think that had this game been last week, let's flip it around, and it's Notre Dame then BC, I might be a little less certain about this contest, but they had their scare. Clemson had their scare, right? You look up. We're paying attention to Michigan State. You look up and say, Boston College is beating Clemson. I think just the jolt of not having your playmaking quarterback, the other guys needing to step up and fill in some gaps for the young fella, took them a minute to find their bearings, but. To have now a game under their belts and a couple of weeks of practice under their belts, Notre Dame is not. I think Notre Dame's overrated. Notre Dame doesn't scare you particularly offensively. I'm trying to remember the game a couple of weeks ago where they put up was it the Louisville game? Where they put up 12. It was a very low scoring affair. This is not a high octane attack. Whereas when you got Travis Etienne in the backfield, I don't care who your quarterback is. Get the man the football. There is no one on Notre Dame's defense that can, tackle him in the open field. I just think Clemson wins this game, not by the margin that we would expect with Trevor Lawrence out there. But again, I think this is a double-digit victory, a comfortable victory for Clemson today.
I'm going to get into my pick in just a moment. But seeing the Clemson-Boston College game in the background reminds me that when Michigan is being upset, when you're not expecting Michigan to lose, there's always another game where some other ranked team is on the cusp. I can't tell you how many times Michigan goes on to lose that game, but the other team went on back to win, which just makes it even more infuriating. Why can't we be that team that comes back to win or hold off the dogs?
I was thinking the same thing as I was watching the game last week. They're coming back. Can we mount something? I was right there with you, man.
It just doesn't seem to happen. So I agree with Ira's assertion, and they are hyping this as the biggest game in the ACC in 5 years. It may be even bigger than 10 years. The problem is, to me, it's going to be for nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because you know how they determine the ACC championship this year? They've added Notre Dame, the top 2 teams. They're not playing divisions. Okay? So let's take a look at the ACC standings. It looks like the ACC. After a few games being played, there's only 3 teams that have 1 loss or less. And that's Notre Dame, Clemson, and Miami that just came back from like 10 down to North Carolina State in the fourth quarter last night. So Clemson has already beaten Miami. So if Clemson loses this game without Trevor Lawrence, we're going, oh my gosh, the Clemson dynasty is over. No, you're going to be in second place in the ACC. They'll rematch Notre Dame. Trevor Lawrence is probably playing in that game, and you've hit the reset button. So for the biggest hyped game in at least 5 years in the ACC, to me, this is nothing more than an exhibition game. And
except if Notre Dame gets beat badly at home, they're done. I mean, they may make it back to the conference championship game, but their conversation is done.
Well,
and then that goes back to the same point that they're actually overrated.
But in terms of this determining Clemson and Notre Dame, the fate of the ACC playoff bid, no. To me, this is exhibition. I don't even know how much I'm even going to watch this game. As far as picking the game is, I just don't think Ian Book is enough to carry Notre Dame to a victory over a top-ranked team.
Yeah, it was that Louisville game that I watched. That was a slugfest. That soured me on Notre Dame. The 12-7 victory over Louisville. Like, are you kidding me? This is a top 10 team. Give me a break.
They kicked Pat Narduzzi's butt, but
no top 10 team scores 12 points in today's college football. And I mean, that's just, I'm sorry.
Ian Book
doesn't fit.
I got to tell you, after a really fun, few games, the NFL part, that when you guys did the pick'em and the contest got really heated, it was really fun and exciting. You guys are 6-1 coming into this week, and you picked all the same games. So you guys made this really boring for me this week, watching as the games go by to see who's going to maybe take an advantage in the pick'em contest. Listen after the game for the Retirement Income Solutions Locker Room Wrap-Up Show, brought to you by Retirement Income Solutions and presented by Alta Equipment Company, here on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket and on Ticket TV. Coming up next, we check the confidence meter after 2 games. This is the Key Bank Countdown to Kickoff, live from Saline, Ypsilanti, and Ann Arbor on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket and on Ticket TV.
So I didn't show this to you, Steve. Yeah. Sorry. I was supposed to wait for it to clear. Sorry, Miz.
You good, bro.
Sorry, Miz. But
I saw Mrs. hand go down on the thing, so we're good.
So I showed it to the MGO blog guys at Ira side the other day. But, I like to talk to different coaches about what goes on in the game, Al being one of them. But I didn't even ask Vance Bedford for his opinion this week. I just made a post on Twitter. I posted about Bob Shoop, this statement from Michigan saying that he wasn't coaching with the team, which in my opinion, I would be surprised if you see Bob Shoop coach Michigan ever. I just think that this is it. We shall see. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I posted the statement and Vance responded to the statement on Twitter, and I said, Ira, did I give the impression that I was saying that this game, Michigan losing to Michigan State, had anything to do with, anything at all to do with Bob Shoop not being there? Because I got this. I'm going to share this screen. I got this tweet from Vance. Is that showing up? All right. So you see his message, Steve?
I'm squinting, but I can get to it.
Hello, Sam. I watched the MSU versus UM game. Why play man when you don't have man corners? The safety coach had nothing to do with the corners. They need to play some zone to protect the corners. OSU will score 50 on the corners.
Well, first of all, Miz, that was a brilliant dramatic reading of Vance Becker.
We have a lot of practice with the Townie top 3 with Rich Reddy, so we have a lot of dramatic reading practice.
Bring it back up, and I'll do it Macho Man style, okay? Bring it back, I'll do it Macho Man.
I got a follow-up for you. There's a second one, because I said, Vance, I agree with you. And so then he came with Miz. Can you read that one?
When you play man coverage, the corners are on an island. They have struggled
versus
OSU in bowl games the past 4 years. You need to add some type of zone coverage,
That's pretty good, Miz.
Pretty
I like
good,
it.
Yeah.
I'll say good morning to my parents who are watching, so a quick wave over. Say hi to my parents while this is
Right.
Hi,
watching
Mama
this
Pop
morning.
Drop.
That was good, Miz. To be able to do the Macho Man in a non-Macho Man script. It's impressive.
And so, he first of all, it was good to see a lifelong secondary coach and defensive coordinator make it clear that I wasn't just giving some off the wall fan take to this whole thing. Say, man, they got to help the corners. Now, I like to be measured, very, very measured in my response and analysis, to not be overly emotional.
30.
Right?
30 seconds.
But man, that is my biggest question about today.
Thanks, Rob.
Do they do something different? Something other than, hey, they're going to play more cover 2. Do they do something different to help their corners today if it winds up being the case that, the referees are letting them play on the outside or not letting them play on the outside, I should say, when it comes to physicality?
All right, 10 seconds, stand by.
Standing by.
Back live on radio in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome back to the Key Bank Countdown and Kickoff on Sports Talk 1050 WTK, the ticket online at WTK.com, and also online on Ticket TV. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, and we are on WTK.com/countdown. And last week, I had asked you guys a bunch of questions. So I'm joined by Sam Webb and Steve Clarke here on the show. I asked you guys a bunch of questions, your confidence level after week 1. And needless to say, these conversations change from one week to the next. And this is no different than any other football season, but this may be more of a dramatic swing than normal. So I want to bring back some of these. And actually, in this segment, I only want to focus on one of these. And I just want you guys to talk about it. We were briefly talking about it in the break for those that are watching on Ticket TV. But talk about the confidence level in defensive back play. And there's a difference between the safeties and the corners. But Sam, safeties were a conversation this week because we got news about the safeties coach, which has not changed anything with this team because that situation has been going on for the last many weeks. It's not an in-season thing. But those that haven't heard the news, safeties coach Bob Shoop is not with the team. But Sam, you start with the conversation, but we're talking about your confidence level in defensive back play, and just talk about those safeties and corners.
Yeah, man. And first, as you guys know, unless you've been under a rock somewhere, Bob Shoop hasn't been coaching this team since late August. So they have gotten used to life without him. Sean Larkins, a defensive analyst, that the connection was Chris Partridge. They were together at Citadel. And so a guy who's been around for a bit has coached DBs at a much lower level. But they certainly, as far as his acumen is concerned, he's a guy who they have some trust and belief in, but obviously he's inexperienced at this level. That's why you see Mike Zordich sort of helping out with the safeties also. But I think the bigger issue for them right now, and I don't want to act like there weren't technical issues out on the corner. Even at safety, I think that Brad Hawkins didn't have a good game against Michigan State. I think that there are things that they have to be prepared to do to help their secondary, to help their corners, that they obviously didn't want to do, nor did they have to do in the past. You just don't have the kind of speed on the corner that you've had in past years. So in instances where they are going to deny you physicality, tell you very, very clearly that we are not going to let you put your hands on a pede. We are going to be calling it tight, tugs on the jersey and that kind of thing. If they're going to call it that tight, these are not the kinds of corners that that are turn and run guys. Turn and run if they can't get their hands on you. And I think there has to be an adjustment to that. Where, not to say that they can't play man. Let's not deal in extremes here. It's they can't play as much man as maybe you played in the past. And in your zone package, while you played more zone, maybe they have to play some softer zones. So maybe they have to be willing to sprinkle in some cover 3. We're going cover 3. We're playing deep as the deepest. We're keeping everyone in front of us. We're coming up and rallying to the football and seeing if teams can methodically move up and down the football field. And that is run so counter to the way that Don Brown wants to play. I think he would call it a passive approach to defense. That's why you'll never see you won't hear me mention quarters, because I think he quit before he played quarters coverage. I mean, I've seen him talk about it in press conferences before. But some version of cover 3. I know that they have studied the San Francisco 49ers, for instance, a base cover 3 team that vary their underneath coverages in ways that really, really makes them effective. They studied that. I don't know if it's something that they can employ or that they're ready to employ. I just know, Steve, that whatever it looks like, whatever helping the corner looks like for them, do we see more of that this week? All right. I don't pretend to sit here and know what the answer is. I just know it can't be the answers that they came with last week and expect a different result if you see the game being called the same way it was called last week.
Exactly right. Michigan has some advantages when they're allowed to tug and pull technique and not be called for it, when they were immediately by this officiating crew. And I don't mean to disparage them, but that's just the way it's going to be. Sometimes you got an umpire that, calls the tight corners at home plate. Some of them don't, so this is what you got. I think the problem Michigan fans has is they just don't see any tangible differences. I mean, it's just like one offensive series after another. It's a bomb down the field. Now, on the good side, Jaden Reed and Jan Naylor, I were limited in their catches. I can't remember how many, but I wanted to say it was like a combination of 3, and it was just Ricky White that exploded because they just could not account for 3. Mm-hmm. Indiana's got 3. A lot of other teams have got 3, and Michigan State shows you don't have to be a powerful third guy to do it. Ricky White caught 1 catch against Rutgers last year.
And he only played because Trey Mosley was out.
And exactly. I mentioned that with you on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
Mosley was out with an injury.
West Bloomfield zone.
And so he comes in and plays, and he's a household name for a generation.
Right.
To
right.
Michigan State fans. And so what, again, is frustrating is it's deja vu. We have seen this before. We've seen this with Ohio State. We've seen this in Happy Valley at Penn State. Not as much in Ann Arbor because Michigan dominates Penn State in Ann Arbor. But when it goes to Happy Valley games, there's the bomb down the field, and it's going to be caught. And it's the same narrative you hear from the broadcasters who don't follow Michigan day in and day out. You just like to see some tangible differences. And it's been 5 years, and I just haven't.
And see what I hear coming through in Steve's tone is you just have this sinking feeling that they kind of that the philosophy is we're going to do what we're going to do. This is who we are, and if we can't win this way, we just won't win. That's just the impression you get. Now, will it work out that way? I don't know. We'll see. Definitely puts a lot more pressure on the offense because look, hey, they need to be in the 30s anyway. I mean, that's just college football today, right? And while you could look at it and say, hey, your defense needs to be able to clamp down more than they did last week. The fact of the matter is, I think, Steve, they're going to have to win some high scoring affairs this year, in my opinion. Offense has to have the mentality that if we don't score 30, we didn't do enough. It was a bad day, even with all the inexperience they have. I mean, I use this analogy on the air, Steve, with Ira, but you have a couple of kids, right? And when they were younger, I mean, what's the age gap for your kids?
2
years. So let's say they're
2 months. Go ahead, move on. I'm sorry.
But let's say that that you leave and they are charged with cleaning up the house. Do you expect both of them to have done the same? Or let's say, you have a stack of bricks. This is a stack of bricks, and you want those bricks moved from one side of the yard to the other. Who do you expect to have moved more of the bricks? I mean, it's two people, but don't you expect for one of your kids to have moved more bricks than the other? Because one of your kids is stronger than the other, right? That's just the nature of the beast. You're going to win games if you're Michigan. I think the offense is going to have to move more bricks. They're going to have to score more points. It requires them to get back on track quicker, execute like they did, or at least somewhere between Minnesota and Michigan State, and get back to moving the football up and down the field, scoring in the 30s, and being able to win a shootout. Because I think on defense, man, they're kind of limited. We got a question from Rod Clark on in the comments, like, where is DJ Turner? Haven't seen him on the field yet. He's been banged up. You didn't. And not only haven't you seen him play corner, you haven't even seen him on special teams. So when we talk about the options, people say move Dax to corner. That just leaves you with with some an issue potentially when it comes to your nickel spot in coverage. Now you got some guys that you're confident in, maybe stepping in there and seeing what they can do. But I'm just saying that's not a surefire answer. You're just plugging one hole and maybe opening another.
Listen after the game for the Retirement Income Solutions Locker Room Wrap-Up Show for the offensive play of the game, brought to you by the Ticket's real estate partner, Matt Dejanovich, here on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket and on Ticket TV. Stay with us. This is the KeyBank Countdown to Kickoff on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket and on Ticket TV. Clear.
You were going to say, Steve?
No, I'll save it for the matchup.
Gotcha.
I'll save it for the matchup. But yes, I mean, Sam, when you talk for 3 minutes, I've easily got 4 or 5 comments waiting in the queue to come back.
Well, I'm gonna see when we come back here. We just have a brief segment when we come back here. So why don't you respond when we come back?
No. I'll wait for the third hour when we do the matchups. It will be fine. It gives me something to talk about then. But it's like the comment section it just starts to pile up as Sam talks. I mean, it's my comments in my head is rotating, and then I decide at the moment, am I going with point 1 first? Am I going with point 3 first? Should I take the most recent thing he said? Should I go back to the very beginning and sum it up? What should I do? Okay. And now I get to go. Quick. Point number 2, Sam.
Yeah, I don't think that, Zeke said, why are they playing trail coverage after getting beat repeatedly? I don't think they're always trailing by design. Trailing is strategy, man.
Well, I'll tell you what, Sam, we're in a break. I'll probably talk about it in the third hour. But notice how often they were trying to attack deep between the numbers and the sideline. We watched Michigan safeties who weren't quick enough to get help on the corner. They couldn't move from the center of the field to the sideline fast enough to be able to help. We've got a fast enough guy to do it that time, but now he's going to be more responsible for coming upfield, 10 to 15 to 20 yards away from the line of scrimmage, sort of taking Dax out of the play to throw deep between the numbers and the sideline again. And they're just going to keep trying to isolate the one corner on the field, whoever it's going to be, and they're not going to get much safety help because Dax is going to need to move up.
That's why I said softer zones. Look, it's ideally, you can play cover 2, have cover 2 be your primary zone, and that be the component of your defense. But man, they're gonna have to play 3 deep. And keep everything more than certainly we've ever seen them do it. I think if they're going to protect down the football field and hope that the whatever leak is sprung, because I don't want to make it sound like that's a panacea. You are creating a problem likely in your front when you take a safety out of the box or out of force position. I mean, are they going to be able to run the football better? Are they going to be?
1 minute.
Are they going to be able to move the football on you consistently, short and intermediate? That's a risk you take. It's likely to be the case that they are able to exploit some vulnerability there. But what would you rather have? Would you rather have them go down the field in one shot, or would you rather have them show you that they can move methodically down the football field and 10, 12 play drives, and maybe you make a play in there, right? Maybe you force a turnover. Maybe they make a mistake.
Depends on who you're playing.
Yeah, I would rather go that route than to have them go down the field in one big shot and have a short field to score off of like we saw last week.
Given a second chance against Michigan State, and there's not much you could do about.
Stand by, guys.
You try something different because of the.
Here we go. Back live in radio in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome back to the KeyBank Countdown, a kickoff brought to you by KeyBank, powered by Bud Light, driven by Brighton Ford, and supported locally by Wolverine Rental. Ira Weintraub here, along with my guys Sam Webb and Steve Clarke. And I got to tell you, you got to stick around. You got to watch on Ticket TV on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on WTK.com/countdown. If you go there, you can enter to win great prizes. But if you watch online, you get the break conversations, and these are very entertaining conversations that we have, whether it's during this show, also when we have Joe Simon on Fridays, the Roundtable on Thursdays. Monday morning quarterback Andy Minery on Mondays. So always fun to watch us on Ticket TV, the breaks in particular. And I know you guys are having a very good conversation there during the break. You want to continue this conversation for a couple of minutes while we have them here, Sam and Steve?
Steve?
Yeah, so when we last left the segment, we were talking about choices, about how you help your corners. And one of the things is, Sam and I know, because we talked about it in the press conference, there were previous safeties at Michigan that couldn't make it from the center of the field to the sideline to be able to help a cornerback. They just couldn't race there fast enough in time. Well, now they do have a guy in Zach to be able Dax Hill to come back and do that. But the problem is Michigan State, and I think other teams are going to do this too, is going to attack deep between the numbers and the sideline. And Dax is going to have to play more up front to support the run game and the intermediate passing game through the slot. So Michigan, again, is stuck in this situation where if you throw deep in the corner between the sideline and the numbers, it's the least likely place to be able to get help from anywhere. And that's just something that Michigan's going to have to figure out, Sam. And you know this, and you know the sacrifices that have to be made in order to have extra corner help, and you'll explain that.
Yeah, it's why I said they need to play. They need to play some more 3-deep coverage. It certainly makes you vulnerable underneath. It takes a safety out of the box or out of force position. You're relying on your front, on your linebackers to be able to stop the run without safety help. And again, I think it's important when we talk, Steve, to not deal in extremes. Do they need to be in 3-deep coverage all the time? No, I just think they need to have some element of it mixed in, right? I mean, you gotta have some protection built into the plan because they just, right now, whether it's what you're asking them to do, not necessarily matching their talent, between that and the limited availability of other options. I mean, you got some young guys you can try. We saw some Makari Page to this point in the season, Steve. Maybe get some Andre Selden in there on the slot as well, a young guy. You got some pieces you could try, but they are far from proven. So would you rather play with proven guys with a little softer cushion, play them softer on the back end and hope that you hold up better, that your guys in the front seven hold up better with you leaving them alone than your guys on the back end hold up when you leave them alone, Steve?
I think it depends on the opponent. Are you playing against a team that has a strong passing attack and a strong rushing attack? Well, then you're probably screwed. but if one is better at passing but can't do the running game, it makes it easier,
right,
to make that change.
Right.
And you tell me, Sam, as one who's had to watch the film over and over again, Michael Barrett. I mean, I'm not criticizing the young man at all, but he's the Viper.
Right.
A lot of people feel in that position you're basically a linebacker / safety, varying. But when I see Michael Barrett play, he's more like outside linebacker, defensive end, type of thing, because they're playing a 4-2-5. And I see Michael Barrett acting the line more than
we got
grown.
We got some reverb, Steve. So I'll try to jump in. I think with their Viper, one of the more versatile pieces to the defense, you see them charge that guy with some safety responsibilities. And we've seen some this. So this is the part where the coaches would say, all right, this was much like you saw on offense. This was poor execution, poor assignment, poor, execution of assignment where, hey, if we're in man to man and we have motion and you have a safety sort of spin down on one side, your Viper, and we saw this happen in the game, needs to spin back to the middle of the football field. We saw them have some issues with that at times, and Michigan State took advantage. Think about the long run they had in the first half up the middle. It was a zone run, and Rocky Lombardi comes out and switches the play to the left side because he has numbers to the left, and so motion comes, and you see Mike Barrett spin down with the motion, and Brad Hawkins, he's going over to the other side, but he over rotates. He gets out of position, and then it allows for, and when there was a bust up front on a stunt, there's a wide open lane. Now your safety, if he doesn't over rotate, he's right there to stop it for at least a 10-yard gain. It winds up being like a 40-yard gain. That's the kind of thing that we saw on defense too, that you can expect to get better. But to your point, Steve, again, when you talk about some of the issues they have with foot speed on the back end, I think it requires you to not put it all on execution, I think is the point. Is it just purely execution, or do you have a limitation right now with this particular crew compared to other crews with the speed that you have back there? And I think the answer to that question is yes. You do have a limitation that I think you have to compensate for with your game plan.
Listen after the game for the Retirement Income Solutions Locker Room Wrap-Up Show for the drive of the game, brought to you by Brighton Ford here on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket and on Ticket TV. Coming up next, we kick off hour 2 with Meet the Hoosiers. So we're going to get more into the matchup between the Hoosiers and the Wolverines. Stay with us. This is the KeyBank Countdown to Kickoff on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket and on Ticket TV.
Clear?
Steve?
Yes,
Back?
I'm here.
Look, I don't want to make it sound like I got all the answers.
I
I haven't coordinated a team, but I've talked to guys who have coordinated teams. And what they say is, man, you need to throw some softer zones in there. That's why I showed Vance's commentary. Vance is talking to Charles Woodson, and they're talking to all these. I mean, it was kind of like what Charles was talking about at halftime. Like they're looking and they're like, hey man, we don't have those kinds of guys. So I know what I'm seeing is not just a fan take. Put it that way.
How many times, Sam, have you heard Don Brown say, "I don't know how to coach"? I've heard it a lot.
You kind of broke up there, Steve. How many times have you heard him say what?
I don't know how to coach any other way.
Yeah, and that's my sort of, that's why I'm so hesitant when it comes to what do I expect in this game. I think it's like you just laid out, Steve. I think he is who he is as a coach, that they're going to be aggressive, and if you can beat our aggression, if you can take and make those shots, then I'll tip my cap to you. I think that's kind of the mindset. Now, will that change some? I don't know. I don't know. We got to wait to see.
Sam, don't underestimate Steve's resume.
Well,
Steve has coordinator experience. I know.
Before M. Victors joined me, I was doing defense, and M. Victors did defense when I was, head coach in Pee Wees and Squirts, and it seems so ridiculous to bring up the analogies. I recommend every media person to coach a flag football team. You just the analogies actually start coming together a little bit, and I've been overwhelmed by talent, and you know what they do? They attack the heck out of you on offense. They Don Brown you on defense because they can. And every time I look at it, I go, well, I know how to beat it. I know exactly what to. I see what they're doing, and I know how to answer that. I can't, not because I'm not competitive. It's because the personnel won't allow me to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just have to go. You're going to get your butt kicked that day or whatever. And you sit there and go, boy, if I had those kids, I could answer that. I mean, I love the kids I had. I mean, the whole point of growth is why you coach. Watching them get from point A to point B, regardless of what level they're at, is what makes it fun to me. What makes it fun for me.
Open audio in 10 seconds, gentlemen.
Gotcha.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, there's a kryptonite, and Ohio State uses it.
Yeah, man. Ooh. I don't even want to think about that shit.
Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, The Ticket, presents the KeyBank Countdown to Kickoff.
The Michigan Wolverines are back on the gridiron today, looking to bounce back from their bitterly disappointing loss to Michigan State 1 week ago. The team regressed on offense. There were coaching errors and execution mistakes in Game 2 that were not there in Game 1. Can they regroup and get back on track in Game 3? The defense was exposed. There are coaching and execution deficiencies that need to be mended or masked. Can that side of the ball show dramatic signs of improvement in just 1 week? We start to get answers to those questions and more starting at noon today. It's the Michigan Wolverines versus the Indiana Hoosiers. Today is the first November game day in the Big Ten.
Live from Saline, Ypsilanti, and Ann Arbor, Michigan. This is the KeyBank Countdown to Kickoff with Ira Weintraub, Sam Webb, and Steve Clarke. The 1-1 Michigan Wolverines are back on the road for a matchup with the ranked Indiana Hoosiers. Kickoff from Bloomington is at noon, but first, get ready for the game with the KeyBank Countdown to Kickoff. Brought to you by KeyBank, powered by Bud Light, driven by Brighton Ford, and supported by Wolverine Rental and Supply on the official voice of Michigan Sports. Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, The Ticket, and on Ticket TV. Now, here's your host for the KeyBank Countdown to Kickoff, Ira Weintraub.
4, 3, 2.
And welcome back to the KeyBank Countdown to Kickoff. Ira Weintraub, Sam Webb, Steve Clarke, and we get into hour number 2, which means it is now time to meet the opponent. So, Steve Clarke, this is not your mother and father's Indiana Hoosiers. This is a pretty good football team. Tell us about the Hoosiers, starting with their head coach, and we'll work our way through the offense and then, of course, to the defense.
Well, okay, first of all, Tom Allen is sort of like Tom Arnold, but so was Tom Crean. So you have an enthusiastic head coach, just maybe 1 or 2 notches behind PJ Fleck, but that's Tom Allen. To understand IU, though, you have to understand their culture right now. And it's a basketball school with football is an afterthought. Basketball has come down a bit over the last decade or so. Football is on the rise. Indiana 2-0 in conference play for the first time since 1991. Now think about that. Think about that. You're undefeated after 2 games for the first time in 29 years. I mean, the Lions have had a better chance of winning a division.
True.
In that period of time. So
True.
just getting to 2-0 is a big deal. And they had a breakthrough last year by finishing above 500 in conference play, but they still lost to Ohio State. They still lost to Penn State, Michigan State, and of course, Michigan. But the biggest breakout happened 11 days ago, or 14 days ago now, when they miraculously beat Penn State against a 99% plus odds of win probability. And until
James Franklin, baby. James Franklin
not only decided not to kneel, but to score, giving IU a chance to force overtime, which they did. They eventually won the game, and it was Indiana's first win over a top 10 team since 1987. Okay, that's 33 years, a win over a top 10 team. Think about that in the culture. By the way, it's only the 6th time that IU's program history that they beat a team ranked in the top 10. So this is where they're at. And so there's some excitement, and it's a slow build, and it's not a flash in the pan type of build. It is a slow build, and people like slow builds because it has a chance of actually lasting. If you can't beat one of the 4 teams, though, in the division, those Super 4 teams, your Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan State, then your fate is sealed. but they got that win against Penn State. They're coming into a limping Michigan team that is having a bit of soul searching right now. And of course, the topic of conversation this week is Indiana the second best team in the division? Are they the second best team in the Big Ten? We shall see in just a few hours. Now, on offense, a lot of people are familiar with the offense. Michael Penix is your quarterback. You've seen his athletic ability the past year. Those may quickly remember his amazing stretch on the 2-point conversion that gave the Indiana win over Penn State. He's a tall quarterback. He has a whip of an arm that can move the ball. And if you haven't seen him, I mean, he's going to remind you of Joe Milton just from outward appearances. Wide receiver Whop Phillier, second team All Big Ten player last season, had 1,000 yards in receiving. You're probably familiar with Ty Freifogel, who has scored against Michigan. Tight end Peyton Hendershot is one of the best in the Big Ten. He had 2 TDs last week. At running back, you got Stevie Scott. He's returning. He's a second team All Big Ten player. And, comes right out of Mike Hart's backyard. Mike Hart, by the way, now the associate head coach. So got a job title elevation. Might mean that he could be looking at a head coaching position sometime in the near future. But Stevie Scott came from Mike Hart's own backyard up in Upper State New York. Again, a second team All Big Ten players last week. So you're very familiar with those names, but their numbers this year aren't exactly all that impressive in the early going. IU is averaging just 279 yards per game.
Right.
Michigan's passing game alone is nearly that. And the Hoosiers are just averaging 75 yards on the ground. Penn State's defense, they got a lot to say about those numbers, but IU knows there's an adjustment period going on right now with former Wolverine quarterback and Washtenaw County's own Nick Sheridan taking over as offensive coordinator for the first time in his career. And I think what's, the most fascinating thing from an Ann Arbor and a Michigan perspective is Sheridan's story, because it's an interesting one. He grew up in Saline, just outside of A Square. His dad was a coach at Michigan. To hear Nick tell his story this past week was great. A walk-on who didn't know he was invited to join the team until a couple of days before training camp. He's 7th on the quarterback depth chart. He got moved to fullback on the scout team, so he got the privilege of getting his butt whipped and hammered by Prescott Burgess and David Harris, not on a daily basis, but a play-by-play basis. He wanted to coach, and though he did not follow his father's footsteps directly, whom he says he idolized, he followed another coach, and it was Mike DeBoer. Michigan coaches' families tend to stick together for obvious reasons, and Mike DeBoer has a son who was Nick's age. They played high school ball together, and Mike took Nick under his wing. And after being a quarterback coach at IU for a couple of years, DeBoer retired from the Hoosiers. Kalen DeBoer takes over as OC, he's a former Eastern coach, who, wherever he goes, makes the offense a whole lot better. He's a quarterback coach by nature. So naturally, more often than not, a young guy like Sheridan is, networking, having to find another job because, Kalen DeBoer is going to be the quarterback coach. But DeBoer himself, not DeBoer, but DeBoer himself, like Nick Sheridan, and told Tom Allen, we got to keep this guy. And Sheridan got to hang around as a tight ends coach. When DeBoer elevated this offense greatly in 2019, he naturally moved on up the ladder. Sheridan gets tabbed, which is a testament to him at the age of 32. So I think it's a cool story locally to see where he's at. But right now there is a bit of an adjustment period.
Yeah.
I think part of it has to do that Kalen DeBoer took this team from mediocre to great, and now Nick Sheridan, as a first-time OC, is trying to keep them great, and it's probably going to take a few weeks, if not a year.
Yeah, I think that you can already hear for as many Indiana fans as there are, the 2 or 3 of them, Indiana football fans anyway, they have started chirping a bit about Nick Sheridan's play calling. Brian Cook made reference to that on the roundtable segment earlier this week, where he's like, he called his play calling sequencing atrocious, was Brian's quote, talking about Nick Sheridan. I think if you listen to that, if you look at the numbers, 279 yards per game, 2.27 yards per rush, it'll lull you to sleep, Steve, into thinking that this is, this offense, while it has some names maybe you heard before, it's not really that potent. And I think it boils down to exactly what you just pointed out. the newness, a guy stepping into that job, an elevated role, finding his way a little bit. I think it also, you can also focus on the fact that, hey, Indiana's not sneaking up on a soul anymore. How many of us had Indiana as the trap game for Michigan? Everyone was calling Indiana that, right? So they don't come in and you don't know what Indiana does. So you have that now too. But how hard is it if you're Indiana, if you're Nick Sheridan, to look at that tape from the Michigan State game and craft your game plan? Steve, I don't think it's very hard. I think it's quite clear what they're going to try to do to Michigan today, and they have the personnel to accomplish it. So that's why I say, the question is, what is Michigan going to do, knowing that skill talent wise, this is some of the best skill talent you're going to see this year. I mean, the receiver, I think Whop Philyor is an outstanding player. You know what I think of Michael Penix Jr. I mean, in the Penn State game is another game that'll lull you to sleep because Michael Penix Jr. was running for his life in that game, Steve. Now, lest we forget thinking that Michigan was gonna get after Rocky Lombardi last week after didn't he get sacked like 5 times against Rutgers? Didn't we think that was going to lead to Michigan being able to get after him? So all of these numbers and all of these things that we have seen from Indiana up until this point don't do anything to lessen my concern about their offense against Michigan's defense today, Steve.
Right. So obviously this week provides the opportunity for the critics to get off of Nick Sheridan's back. Because if Penix throws it up and has guys like Whop Philyor and Ty Freifogel and Peyton Hendershot, who is, besides Pat Freiermuth, probably 2 of the best tight ends in the Big Ten. We haven't seen Nick Eubanks yet. I'd love to compare it, but I just haven't seen him.
Right.
They have the tools there to be a potent offense. It just hasn't happened yet, but it's 2 games. And how many times have we watched good Michigan offensive coordinators take a few games to get their feet wet and get the team humming? So I don't want to paint a picture where Nick Sheridan got lucky because his dad was a coach and a friend of his took him under his wing and brought him along. Sheridan earned it. I mean, he should have been moved out probably when Kalen DeBoer took over, but he got to stay and proved it as a first-year tight ends coach. And then he was tabbed the successor when Indiana could have gotten somebody else. So I don't want to paint a picture that Nick is out of his league. He's not.
Right. And I think, part of that has to be you want continuity in scheme and off. I mean, you go and hire another offensive coordinator. Does that change what you do? And so if you have a guy that you think is ready for the job can handle the job, and he knows you don't have to change terminology, you don't have to change anything with scheme, then you go for it, which is one of those reasons why I think that they'll get it. It's not like they're coming in and these guys are slow to achieve efficiency because they are learning the scheme. I think he's learning how to be an offensive coordinator, and I think that's been the limitation so far. But again, how hard is it to game plan this game after you watched that tape last week? If you have problems calling this game, if you're Nick Sheridan, I think it's going to be a long year.
Listen after the game for the Retirement Income Solutions Locker Room Wrap-Up Show for the gem of the game, brought to you by Lewis Jewelers on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket and here on Ticket TV. Coming up next, more on the Hoosiers. We flip to the other side of the ball. Stay with us. This is the Key Bank Countdown to Kickoff on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket and on Ticket TV.
Clear.
All right, so for those that are watching on Facebook, we missed some comments for a little while. We had a tech issue, but it seems like it has been fixed. So I think
maybe this is a Quiddy Pay Aiden Hutchinson game. I mean, when you look at what Penn State was able to do, hopefully that is more telling than what Rutgers was able to do against Michigan State, right? Tough task for those guys because early in the game, man, he was just dropping back throwing fades, and it's like, I mean, the pressure doesn't even really have an opportunity to get there. As the game went on, he started to have a little more time. So even when even when it wasn't a fade, he still had a little bit of time in the pocket. Hopefully, those guys are just able to make more plays up front. That will relieve some of the stress on the back end, but I'm not counting on that, man. Got to score some points, Steve Clarke. Got to score some points, man. A lot of them, in my opinion.
Yeah, Mike, I don't think you're alone when you say you're on an island. That I was surprised that Michigan opened as a 2.5, I think, point favorite, and it actually moved up to like 3.5. I haven't looked this morning to see if it's.
I find it initially a surprise too. Here's the thing. When you have geared up every year, Indiana beating Michigan, or any of them really, Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State, it's like Michigan trying to beat Ohio State, and it's in Indiana's head.
Well, technically, it's more because Michigan has beaten Ohio State since 1987. It feels like they haven't, but they have beaten them since 1987.
No, but
I get that's why that would be one of the things that goes into
my point
the psyche
is
of the.
There's a lot of games that it's not even close. But in the last, 12 to 15 years now since Rich Rod took over, the Indiana games, half the time have come down to the absolute wire. Last possession, overtime, fourth down stops, whatever. Michigan always finds a way to win. And it's got to be someone in their head. So in some ways, I'm not surprised. Remember, in gambling, you're trying to find a line where a number of people are picking this way.
Right, which means more money went on Michigan after the opening line because the number got bigger. That kind of surprised me. I was a little surprised. So, Mike, you're not alone. I was a little surprised that maybe not that it opened. I was surprised at the line, but you're going to get a lot of gamblers looking at history. So that's always a big part of it.
Dave said, was it just that simple? Was it simple that fades, fades and deep balls why there was no pressure? No, it wasn't that. So I think early in the game, it was that simple. But as the game progressed, no. But they did a good job of getting rid of the ball quick in the early going. And, as the game mounted, I don't know if it was a matter of fatigue or frustration. I don't know what it was that later in the game, they just, even when they took a little time in the pocket, it's not like the pressure was so imposing that it obviously didn't force them into any mistakes. So I can't explain why, as the game progressed and they started to take a few more chances, why they couldn't get there. Those guys need to step up their games. Those guys.
Hey, Dooley, I have a 1983 Coke bottle for the Orioles that I still have unopened.
You can replace the one that's on my bar. Very quick story. I had a card night and I had a decorative unopened bottle of Pepsi, and someone mistaken it for something they could help themselves to.
Oh boy.
That was a flat drink, wasn't it? Oh, it's got to be really gross.
All right.
I can see just looking in the bottle how gross the Coke would be if I opened it, but it's pure decoration.
Something I had in the family for a long time.
Back in radio in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Win the ultimate Bud Light Victor's Lounge tailgate at home package, courtesy of our friends at Bud Light. It's easy. Just go to WTK.com/countdown and click for your chance to win the ultimate Bud Light Victor's Lounge tailgate at home package. And that is from our friends at Bud Light and your friends here at Sports Talk 1050 WTK, the ticket. And welcome back to the KeyBank Countdown to Kickoff. We are brought to you by KeyBank, powered by Bud Light, driven by Brighton Ford and supported locally by Wolverine Rental. And now we continue with the second part of Meet the Hoosiers. We flip over to the defensive side of the ball, Steve Clarke.
And the surprising thing here is, Sam, we know about the offense, and many Michigan fans can name IU players on offense. Can they name anybody on defense? And the thing is that's surprising is that I'm more impressed with the IU defense right now than I am with the O. Although certainly the offense has a lot of potential upside as early as this week. IU shares first in the Big Ten in turnover margin. They're +4. They're second in the Big Ten with 5 picks, tied for third in the Big Ten with 6 takeaways. They're led by a few key players, and mostly it's on the back end. But you start off with Micah McFadden, who had a pick last week. He was last year's defensive MVP. He returns. Safety Jamar Johnson was the Big Ten's co-defensive of the player of the week against Penn State. He's got 16 tackles so far at safety position, 2.5 tackles for a loss. He's got a pick. He's got a forced fumble. And even head coach Tom Allen thought that he played better last Saturday against Rutgers. Tywan Mullen is a cornerback to look for. He had 2.5 sacks last Saturday, led the Big Ten in pass breakups in 2019, was a 24/7 freshman All-American in 2019. He plays the nickelback or what they call the husky position, which they say allows him to, be involved in the opponent's run game as well. I think we all know that. Junior cornerback Jalen Williams has an interception in both games this season so far. Allen is one of those guys that was named the game's defensive MVP against Rutgers. And Sam, I know you remember Marcelino Ball.
Yeah.
He was a big-time playmaker. He tore his ACL in September. Regardless of him not playing in this game, I think this is a defense that does make plays from time to time. Michigan was going to have to avoid the big play by their defense and try to make them pay for their aggressive tendencies, just like the Spartans did against Michigan on Saturday.
Yeah, deep shots. Can they inject? Can Josh Gaddis inject some shot plays into the equation? And I was trying to figure out why we didn't really see that last week. I mean, if you look at the explosive plays for Michigan versus Minnesota, if you look at what should have been explosive plays against Michigan State, almost all of them were in the run game. There were some missed opportunities in the pass game too. I can think of an RPO that Joe handed off as a run. If he throws the slant, man, Rodney Bell is probably still running. So a misread on his part. There were some of those instances, but I was trying to determine, like, okay, why with a big arm quarterback like this haven't they called more or didn't against Michigan State based on how the game was being called? Why didn't they call more shots themselves? And Steve, you watched that game. I mean, man, dude, Michigan State was playing their safety 20 yards off. I mean, it was like taking the safety way out of the play. We are going to protect this part. Now, the field started to compress as the game went on. And I wonder if that's not going to be the approach that Indiana plays with today. Like, okay, we don't think you can hit us over the top. That's what I suspect will be the case. That they're going to say, hey, we're going to jump everything short. We're going to compress and condense the football field. We're going to try to take away all your short and intermediate stuff and dare you to take some shots over the top, which is why I think this will be the week where they dial up, at least a few shots per half. And even if they don't hit them, I saw one of the commenters, and not necessarily in this particular show, Steve, say, well, you got to hit them and make them respect them, to make them respect your deep pass. That may be true, Steve, but you don't have to hit them to make them think about it. You got to take them to make them think about it. And I think that's what's going to happen today. I think they're going to take at least a few shots. I think they need to take at least a few shots just to get them thinking about, hey, Michigan will at least try that, might loosen some things up.
Here's the thing, as I mentioned in the defensive portion of the preview, Indiana's secondary is the best part of their defense. Mm-hmm. They're playmakers. They get in the backfield to make sacks. They make interceptions. So if Michigan's taking those shots, beware.
Well,
Indiana makes some plays. Now, where they're soft is up front. So if you think Michigan's got a bit of a stubborn streak, dramatic pause for effect, you might see Michigan still run the ball quite a bit with their pins and poles and their duos and their bluff runs and things like that to be able to to get their yardage that way.
You raise another point that affects all of this, is the health of Michigan's offensive line, which is definitely in question coming on the heels of last week. So that, depending on who they put out on the football field, and we should have some updates on that here in the next hour or so, depending on who they put out on the football field, that might really determine, Steve, ultimately what they can do. Not even what they want to do, but what they can do based on the personnel they have available up front.
Steve, anything we need to know about Indiana's special teams?
They're perfect on field goals. And I can't say anything bad about their punting or their return game. So not much.
So nothing stands out, is what you're saying.
And I generally tend to ignore it at that point. The one thing I didn't include about this Indiana defense, and again, consider the opponent. It's Rutgers. I've watched both Rutgers games this week because I've had to prepare for Michigan State. and Indiana. Rutgers is different. They're a better team than what they used to be. Now, they have such a big hole to climb out of that you still need industrial-grade flashlights to see them coming out of the abyss. But Indiana's defense in the first half, they were on the field 8 times against Rutgers. They forced 4 3-and-outs, got 2 picks, allowed 1 score. That's pretty good. And again, Rutgers has a credible quarterback now. Is he one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the Big Ten? No, it's not even in the top 10. But Noah Vedral is better than Sir Artur Tasowski. And I'm sorry.
Michigan actually recruited that guy, too.
I know. And he's from Michigan and all that. And I've just offended his family and his friends. But there's a long list of Rutgers quarterbacks that, shouldn't have been in the Power 5. They're better than that now with Vedral.
All right, guys, listen after the game for the Retirement Income Solutions Locker Room Wrap-Up Show, brought to you by Retirement Income Solutions and presented by Alta Equipment Company. You hear it here on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket, and you watch it on Ticket TV. Coming up next, we get back to talking about our Wolverines, where they go from here, 1-1 on the season and coming off that disastrous loss to Sparty. Stay with us. This is the Key Bank Countdown to Kickoff, live from Saline, Ypsilanti, and Ann Arbor, and here on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket and on Ticket TV.
Clear.
Yeah, so we'll get into this in the injury section, but at this point, I don't expect Jalen Mayfield to play, and I'd be surprised if Ryan Hayes plays. So we'll get some confirmation one way or the other.
If that's the case, I'm switching from this, Sam, to this.
What'll happen then is that you'll see Stuber at right tackle. You'll see Zach Zinner, who athletically is they've just been talking about
the former Lion running back.
Yeah, freakish athleticism for a guy that big.
Smart man,
but obviously no experience there. But Stuber at right tackle, Zach Zinner at right guard. And then if Ryan Hayes can't go, and like I said, I'd be surprised if he can, then Carson Barnhart at left tackle. And so, I mean, talent but inexperience that you throw in that mix. And what will that mean for what they're capable of doing offensively? That might, affect the ability to take some shots. Time will tell. I think you have to see how the game goes, Steve. I think you can be heartened at least somewhat by what you said about the weakness of their defense being in the front.
Yeah. Then their O-line coach is good. Have you heard of him?
What, their O-line coach?
Yeah, Warner.
Oh, yeah. And their O-line coach is good.
He can bring in some experience and make them better than what they should be.
Yeah, they had a rough go. They had a rough go last week. It wasn't just them. I mean,
it's everybody.
You talk about a bounce back game. Will this be a bounce back game for Ben Mason? I mean, you can look at the level of execution for Michigan as a unit, as an offensive unit from Minnesota to Michigan State, and I think it sort of mirrors. And I'm not saying that he's responsible for it, but the magnitude of the difference in performance is what I'm talking about. The difference in the level of execution for Ben Mason from game 1 to game 2 was the same difference that you saw in the offense as a whole, as far as level of execution from game 1 to game 2. I mean, it was just a very, very off game for him. And I just can't imagine that we'll see him have that kind of game 2 games in a row. Can't imagine we had to see the offense have that kind of game 2 games in a row where they just, blocking the wrong guy, going the wrong way.
Yeah. So Ben Mason sometimes plays like a man possessed. And
that's a great point.
And sometimes we normally say that in a positive way. He may have looked like a man who played possessed in a negative way.
But Steve, I know you say that half jokingly, but I think you're on to something. No, seriously, dude, I think you're on to something, because I'm watching the tape and I'm like, man, this just doesn't make sense. Like, how do you explain this? I mean, not to get into. Let's not get off on a tangent about Wildcat duo. Let's not get off on a tangent.
No more Wildcat.
But
I'm talking about it.
But it's a
Standing by, guys.
I'm not talking Wildcat.
I know. We're standing by.
I was going to reference that play. They ran it against Minnesota, and he runs out. He blocks the right guy.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect execution. And they run the same play, albeit from a different formation. He was offset versus Minnesota. He was in pistol versus Michigan State, but he absolutely does the wrong thing.
Back in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Win the ultimate Bud Light Victor's Lounge tailgated home package, courtesy of our friends at Bud Light. It's easy. Just go to WTKA.com/countdown and click for your chance to win. It's the ultimate Bud Light Victor's Lounge tailgated home package, courtesy of our friends at Bud Light and your friends here at Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket. And welcome back to the KeyBank Countdown to Kickoff. We are brought to you by KeyBank, powered by Bud Light, driven by Brighton Ford, and supported locally by Wolverine Rental. And guys, coming off of that game last week, I mean, it's been a week now, nearly a full week since we've been talking about it, breaking it down. And we spent a lot of time so far this morning on the show talking about the Michigan offense, which we'll get back to. But I want to talk about the defensive side of the ball. And there's two conversations that came out of last week's game. One is the short-term conversation because you still have this season to play. And then there's the long-term conversation, which we'll get to in a moment. But first, and we've touched on this a little bit, but Sam, we'll start with you. Short-term, what can they do to mask the deficiencies that this defense they have?
Softer coverage. I mean, that's the simplest and I think the easiest to execute solution. Now, how you employ that, how you deploy that, hey, I don't get paid millions of dollars to figure that out. But it is not hard to figure that you can deep is the deepest, man. They are not going to beat us over the top. That's a choice. You can make a choice to play that way, understanding that it does not solve your problems. It is not a panacea. It does make you vulnerable elsewhere on your defense. It does expose you to, hey, you got a guy taken out of the run game, essentially. The field underneath, short and intermediate is more open. And so, teams, you're conceding certain things in the front. And Don Brown is not about concessions like that. Make no mistake. But it's a pick your poison kind of scenario, Steve, that you laid out earlier in the show. I think you said something like, hey, if they can run it, they can pass, you're screwed. Right? I mean, it is. I think they're in a pick your poison type of moment. Which poison is more deadly is the question that they have to ask themselves, Steve. If you got to ingest this poison, which one can you live through? And I don't think you can live through the kind of poison they ingested last week. The kind of death by 1,000 pinpricks, can they go down the field in 10, 12 plays? You might be able to survive that kind of poison, Steve.
Yeah, so here's the situation, Sam. If you're going to pick your poison to allow a team to run against you or to throw the bomb against you, Michigan clearly chose throughout the Michigan State game to have the bomb thrown against them. Michigan's running game, other than a 28-yard run early on in the first quarter, Michigan held Michigan State to 2 yards per rush. Okay, so clearly focusing on the run. Let's go to this week's game. IU is balanced. They have talent in Stevie Scott at running back, and they have talent in receivers in Hendershot, the tight end, Freifogel, and Watt Fillier. Okay, so what are you going to do? I think right now, because the rushing yardage is so low, 75 yards per game, you tend more to protect your pass coverage. Here's the deal. The coaching staff at Michigan is more reluctant to protect their corners and their safeties. They're just more reluctant to do it. So while it seems more obvious in this particular matchup to help your secondary, it is least likely for the coaches to actually enact on it. And so that makes the predictability from our standpoint, Sam, you and me, which way are they going to do? I don't know.
Either.
Because logic, to me, the untrained eye, suggests this, but I also know the stubborn streak. And so we have that. And so that's the defense thing. I'm much more optimistic about the offense after watching the film and talking with an offensive coordinator on a television show. And when I mean talking to an offensive coordinator, I watched an offensive coordinator. And what I mean by on a television show is YouTube. It means, I think you get the reference now. I think it means to me that the offense can fix their mistakes. The defense seems to be something a little harder to correct.
Yeah, and I know that you watch week 1 and you think Joe Milton has arrived, right? He's already there. There are no steps. He jumped from the bottom step to the top step in 1 week, right? And then you get into week 2 and you realize, man, you can't skip all those steps. That he is still a young and inexperienced quarterback that, fortunately for him, had a lot of help in week 1. A lot of help from the running game, a lot of help from explosive plays. And while I don't doubt that he felt pressure from starting on the road against a ranked team in his first game, that the pressure of the rivalry game when the guys around him aren't performing, that's a different kind of pressure, Steve. And I wondered if it was going to speed him up, if it was going to make him maybe not see the field as well. And that wound up happening last week, where some of the things he saw in week 1, he wasn't able to see them in week 2.
So one thing we have to start spelling the notion is that Michigan played a ranked team on the road in the first week.
But
I know I like to say it because of the stats.
I mean, but I'm talking about mentally. The pressure he felt mentally. We're on the road. We're playing against a ranked team. No one knew Minnesota wasn't that good at that time.
Right. And of course, there's no home field advantage anymore, the way things are in the Big Ten. So beating a ranked team on the road in this instance, I think, is now out the window. On the optimistic side, Michigan's defensive corners have been allowed to play the way they have been for quite some time. Last week, they weren't allowed to. Does this mean that this week they won't be allowed to, or the following weeks they won't be allowed to? No, not necessarily. Sometimes in basketball, I mentioned the umpire calling balls and strikes in baseball. Sometimes an officiating crew is going to call more offensive fouls than usual. Sometimes they're going to call more traveling balls or double dribble balls than a normal officiating crew. Does that mean the team is screwed now because that's how every referee crew and umpire crew is going to call it? No. So every game is different from an officiating standpoint. Maybe Michigan's defense will be able to help by the fact that a normal game for them is being called. And quite frankly, Michigan is not as good as they were in week 1, and I'm going to be certain to say they're not as bad as they were in week 2. To get there somewhere in the middle, which one is closer, I don't know. We'll find out more as each game develops. We learn more about all these teams as they start playing throughout the weeks of the schedule. By the time you figure them out, the season is over. I think Michigan's got a good chance of playing a lot better defensively and offensively against IU than most people think.
Sam, the other part of this conversation about the defense is more of the bigger picture conversation. And you look back the last few years in matchups against Ohio State, you look back at bowl games, you look back at last week, just different things that seem to be happening. In the long term, is Don Brown still the answer for Michigan at defensive coordinator, or based on just how things have been playing out that maybe or does he have to have, and it's very difficult for a guy at that stage of a career to say, hey, I'm going to completely cut this part of what I do and bring in a whole new part. I'm not getting rid of everything they do, but changing a lot of things up, because it would be a major difference if some of the things you're talking about were implemented in a grand scale.
Yeah, look, I think you have to. I think you got to coach the talent you have. I think you got to adjust on the fly to who's available and in last week's game, how it's being called. So I am not looking for a sea change philosophically long term. But in the short term, I mean, you got to coach who's here, right? You got to coach what you got. And that's, I think, the challenge. As far as, big picture, I mean, you see Jim Harbaugh part ways with friends. I mean, and I'm not saying that Don Brown isn't a friend. I'm saying guys who have been
longer standing relationships.
Yeah, long-term relationships. So I do think that how this season plays out and the kinds of adjustments that they make or don't, I think will weigh heavily in the end of year considerations about what they do moving forward. I do think that this season is important in that regard. I think it has taken on added significance in that way Steve. Whereas, what does this season mean? Is it just about preparation for the next year? Losing to Michigan State, I think, puts, I think it puts a question mark in places where question marks weren't present before.
Well, I think the first loss for Michigan always puts up question marks, and usually the first loss Michigan can be, foreshadowing about how they lose. And defensively, it seems to be the same story. I can tell you, Don Brown's aggressive, dominating defense can be a lot of fun to watch against average teams. I mean, who didn't enjoy the 78-0 shutout of Rutgers? Who didn't love the pacing of Scott Frost in Nebraska 56-10 a couple of years ago? But there's a kryptonite, as I've called it, for the talent and the speed. And in Michigan State's case, they just played inspired football and was able to block up front. Michigan's defense, no turnovers, no sacks. Not saying they didn't get any pressure, but didn't get in the backfield like they did against Minnesota. And Michigan State was able to throw the ball up in the air and have things happen. So while there can be adjustments, there just isn't tangible ones that the fans see and that we see on first glance that suggest things get any different. And if things aren't going to get any different, then you know what your ceiling is. And believe me, Jim Harbaugh being here, Don Brown being here, elevated Michigan from being in that tier that Indiana has been at for the last 5 to 10 years and has put this on this level. Now, I think at some point, Michigan fans are saying, look, thank you, but now we need to move on. And that's something I've always said for years about any coach. You can not only not improve, you can't get worse, you can't stay the same. Otherwise, things change. You just can't be the same record every year. If you're always 12-2, but never win the championship, everybody gets let go anyway because the patience isn't there and they feel that going in a different direction is going to put them over the top.
Listen after the game for the Retirement Income Solutions Locker Room Wrap-Up Show for the offensive play of the game, brought to you by the Ticket's real estate partner, Matt Dejanovic, and you hear it here on Sports Talk 1050, WTK The Ticket, and you see it on Ticket TV. More on the Michigan Wolverines as they get ready to do battle with the Indiana Hoosiers. A beautiful day scheduled, forecasted for down there in Bloomington, 70 degrees, sunny. We always knew Michigan's, third game of the year would be a nice, pretty day. Just didn't know that it would be in November to have that beautiful weather. But that's what it's going to be. And that kickoff, of course, is coming up a little bit after 12 o'clock today down in Bloomington, Indiana. Stay with us. This is the KeyBank Countdown to Kickoff on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket and on Ticket TV.
Clear.
Thank you,
Yeah, G. Benny says Cade McNamara will start week 5. If I bet money, I would bet you that doesn't happen. Joe
injury.
He didn't play bad last week. He just didn't play. He didn't play great. He was just okay. Yeah, he was just okay. He left some things on the football field. He rushed some things, but the mistakes he made were the kinds of mistakes that inexperienced quarterbacks make. Only way to get him over the hump is to play him.
I tell you, if Cade McNamara starting in week 5, it's either because of an injury or COVID.
Right.
So just say health.
Yeah,
health kind of covers both.
Yeah, which the odds are, you never know now.
Yeah. He left some things out there that I think upon film review, it's like, okay, I see how I shouldn't have run there. I see how I shouldn't have handed it off.
Here's your follow-up, Sam, from Les here.
No way. Give me a break. Like, there's just the ceiling for Joe Milton is not the kind of ceiling that you bail on, even after 5 games. I mean, the guy has NFL talent, and so you keep working on that. You keep working towards that.
I'm a fan. Joe. Yeah. Anyway, we've had that discussion before. I don't know how much time we got, but I mean, just because we're in break and we're not going to talk about this on the show, Illinois almost beat Purdue with a 4-string quarterback. It's amazing.
Sometimes this one's for you to answer. I don't have the answer to that. I don't know if you can figure it out. You can put, I don't know how to do it. I guess test it on your
Um,
phone when we come back from break and see. I'm not sure
Oh,
if
it's
to answer
always-
Sheldon's
Yeah.
question.
It's always different depending on the feed.
I know because last week we went to a break and I ran outside real quick and I had this show on our TV outside. We had some friends that were sitting outside and Sherry was having a little of a small gathering, socially distanced outside, but I had the big screen and I had our show on. And I went outside and I was still on the screen when I got outside. And I was kind of counting how long I was still on the screen. And there's a decent amount. I don't know if it's a minute or I don't know the exact length of it, but because there is a delay in in how it's encoded and all that kind of stuff.
It really depends. I've heard you
Yeah.
guys be like within 5 seconds. I've heard it a minute. Sam reacting to my jokes sounds like he must be in Kazakhstan or something because it's like a 10-second delay. And
I'm gonna say hi to our buddy here. Hi,
which
Joe.
joke is he laughing
Hey,
at?
good morning, fellas. How you doing?
Say hi. We got one more second before we get to Joe, but we figured we'd say hi to Joe and wave to him. And
I just want the Miz to do the Macho Man introduction for me. That was all I care about.
Ladies and gentlemen, introducing from the law offices of Joseph A. Simon, the Silver Fox, Joseph A. Simon.
I hope somebody recorded that.
I mean, this
it'll
this
live on
video
the
is
internet
saved, so we can go
forever.
back and find it. Ms. Mark the time. We'll go back and pull the audio.
Hey,
that's-
have you guys played for Joe that commercial clip that I said to you, Ira? Have you ever played it for him?
I haven't actually played it for him.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking
You know what
about.
I'm talking about? You
No.
still have it? You still have it, Ira?
It's somewhere, but I'm not.
Oh.
I don't have access to the system to remember.
So
where I have it.
Joe, I saw a commercial on TV and I rewound the DVR and I recorded it and sent to Ira.
Stand by.
It's yeah.
It's for a drugstore company.
Yeah,
That doesn't
Joe, we'll talk
matter.
next break. We have more to talk. See you in a few, Joe.
All right, guys, we're coming back on radio in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome back to the KeyBank Countdown and Kickoff, brought to you by KeyBank, powered by Bud Light, driven by Brighton Ford, and supported locally by Wolverine Rental. And here we are, guys. The Wolverines trying to rebound from last week. And one of the things that we talk a lot about is the mentality of a football team, right? We talk about not letting one loss get you twice or beyond that. And so that's part of this, right? Isn't it, Sam and Steve, getting beyond last week's game and not allowing those, whether it's the mistakes they made to happen again, or it's just the mental part of losing to Michigan State to not have you focused and ready to go for this game. I don't think that's going to be the case, but that is always a concern.
Dude, they got 7 captains. This is where leadership matters, because clearly we all process disappointment. So we process things in different ways. You know, you're going to have some guys who I'm sure you had guys during the week who it was very, very tough for them to compartmentalize and to flush this. This is where your leadership matters, to be able to get them to focus on what's ahead, to not dwell on the mistakes, to look at them, to work on them, but to not dwell on them. I think that's one of the things, even in just 2 weeks with Joe, that's not something that I'm worried about with him. So I that's one of the things that gives me some optimism about how quickly they can get back on track offensively, is that just watching him and getting to know him over the last few years, he's a guy that really seems to be able to do that, to be able to flush it, put it to the side. Hell, I mean, look, there was no one saying, there wasn't anyone certainly outside the program saying that Joe Milton was going to be the quarterback, right? And there was a very clear sort of feeling or sentiment that even from within, that, hey, Dylan is probably going to be the guy. Now, they made it clear that there was going to be some competition, that it wasn't a foregone conclusion, thus the reason for Joe staying. But Steve, think about it. Think about that kind of adversity. You got a McCaffrey here. Are you really going to get a shot to be a quarterback? And he stayed, endured, and now he's a starting quarterback. So applying that to a situation like this, where they have a difficult loss, a gut-wrenching loss, putting that to the side and moving ahead, I think Joe, as the quarterback, can do that. Now, the question is, can the team as a whole, do they come along with him on that? Do the 7 captains, do all of them process it in the same way and come along and help put their minds at ease based on or in the aftermath of that loss last week?
So with Ira's question about losing once actually costing you twice, dwelling on it, sometimes we see that the week after Notre Dame. There's sometimes a letdown after a Notre Dame loss. Your next game is more than likely was another preseason game or a pre-conference game, which they were probably a 4-touchdown favorite, and they don't look very good doing it, at least in the first half. That's one of those deals. The one game that comes to mind that happening after a Michigan State loss is 1999, where they lost to Michigan State.
Illinois.
And then Illinois after the bye week. I think there was a bye week in between. I think Michigan State lost that next week as well to Wisconsin or something like that in 1999. That's 21 years ago. But that is definitely a case where Michigan let one become two. I think, as you say in Joe Milton's case, he's just trying to be a better quarterback each and every day, not taking anything for granted. So I don't think that's a part of his particular DNA. I think some of the upperclassmen who've been around for a while, they've got to gut it up and get focused. Again, those experienced players who have been on the field for a while, overcoming something like that. Seniors might have that particular problem because they feel like a certain part of it's been lost and it's their senior year. And so, again, they're going to have to gut that out and mentally overcome that. So, Indiana, though, it's not a patsy. Indiana's a good opponent. It's going to be at their place. And you're talking about an Indiana team that do they have a mental block against Michigan? Maybe. But each and every year they are fired up to wanting to etch some history, to say something that they could do that no other Indiana team has done in the last 33 years. Win a game over Michigan.
Listen after the game for the Retirement Income Solutions Locker Room Wrap-Up Show for the Drive of the Game, brought to you by Brighton Ford. You can hear it here on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket, and you watch it here on Ticket TV. Coming up next, hour number 3 kicks off with our strategy breakdown with our guy, Joe Simon, the Silver Fox. And we also will have This Week in Michigan Football History. Stay with us. This is the Key Bank Countdown, a kickoff live from Saline, Ypsilanti, and Ann Arbor on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket and on Ticket TV.
Clear. So,
just a real quick message to all of our viewers that are watching. We love sharing your messages, but name calling messages aren't going on the screen. That's just a kind of a rule. Just not a fan of name calling. If you want to say a guy should be fired, it's fine, but don't name calling isn't exactly.
So
I'm not a fan.
So Sheldon, I took a look. The delay between air feed on the radio and the Facebook feed is about maybe 4-second different, maybe.
Really, it's only 4 seconds today,
roughly.
I wonder what it is on YouTube, because I'm kind of guessing on YouTube.
YouTube is actually a little bit longer. It's probably about 6 or 7 seconds, probably.
Wow, that's quick today. Because I'm telling you, last week I went from here to the back. I'm not that fast. to then see myself on TV like for a little while longer, going, oh, I'm still on the screen. Yeah. So last week it must have been longer. I bet you it was 30, 45 seconds last week.
Again, I also did go to Downriver School, so math could be off as well too.
It's pretty easy to figure out how 6 or 7 seconds is very far. Yeah. Oh, unless. Sorry, Joe, didn't mean to not add you in there.
I appreciated the Mrs. joke about downriver.
Joe, so there's this commercial for an internet drug company or prescription company, and I heard it, and I don't know, maybe you've seen it. Martin Sheen's in it.
I don't think so.
Have you seen it? All right, so I'm going to play this for you over my phone. See if you can hear this on the microphone.
It's a great commercial. I actually just saw it.
Here we go.
It's for Martin Sheen. I just saw it the other day, Steve. It was on TV during.
Oh boy!
I don't know what I was watching, but it was on TV again, and yeah, they're the Silver Fox, Martin Sheen.
So Joe, I want you to picture Martin Sheen's kind of running around crazed trying to find cheap medication or something like that.
Well, at my age, that might be me too soon. Yeah.
So these two ladies, they look over and they see it's Martin Sheen, and all of a sudden they're playing this, funky bedroom music, and it's like, is that Martin Sheen? Silver Fox.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Well, Steve, thank you. On that note, can you pour me a gin and tonic? You got some gin back there?
I have some limited resources.
Eat the price again. Excuse me, sir.
If what I hear is true about the offensive line, I may need more of this.
You're going to regret giving that bottle to Miz.
I was gonna say you want a refund?
No, I just need to go get more stuff.
Hold on a second. Let me see.
Oh, there we go. The chalice.
That's good stuff.
Oh,
my gosh.
What's there? Gotta go.
Silver Fox.
Love it, Ira. That is quick.
That was Sam. No, that was all Sam. That was all Sam. Yeah, that was
Sam,
Sam.
how did you get that? So
I don't have
quick?
I don't have two screens to be able to do that from here, but Sam's got it ready to roll. That was great.
Sam, how did you get that so quick?
Top of the hour, guys. That was great.
Presents
What's that?
Search for it on YouTube.
That's awesome.
The Michigan Wolverines are back on the gridiron today, looking to bounce back from their bitterly disappointing.
Why do I feel like the next time I try to telestrate something, Sam's going to counter with that?
The Silver Fox.
Don't be surprised if it becomes a drop by Monday.
Well, that's why I
if you want to go back and find that and create it, go right ahead.
Deficiencies that need to be mended
Otherwise,
or
I'll be doing
masked.
that one
And
this
that
week.
side of the ball showed dramatic signs of improvement in just 1 week.
Oh boy.
We call those whispers in this business, Steve, right? The way she said it is kind of a whisper in the radio business.
Versus the Indiana Hoosiers. Today is the first November game day.
Sam, we should telestrate that commercial. That looked like gap blocking. There's your duo play. There's your duo right there.
Ypsilanti and Ann Arbor, Michigan.
They were the duo.
This is the KeyBank Countdown to Kickoff with Ira Weintraub, Sam Webb, and Steve Clarke.
I bet that same actress
1-1
does
Michigan
1-900
Wolverines are
numbers.
back on the road for a matchup with the ranked Indiana Hoosiers. Kickoff from Bloomington is
Hey,
but
Silver
first, get
Fox.
ready for
It's
the
a family
Okay.
show,
Oh,
guys. It's
yeah.
a family show. Here we go. Stand by.
Brought to you by KeyBank, powered by Bud Light, driven by Brighton Ford, and supported by Wolverine Rental and Supply. On the official voice of Michigan Sports, Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, The Ticket, and on Ticket TV. Now here's your host for the KeyBank Countdown to Kickoff, Ira Weintraub.
Back live on radio in 5, 4, 3, 2.
We are now about 2 hours until kickoff between the Wolverines and the Hoosiers down in Bloomington, Indiana. And we're talking more Michigan football like we do Monday through Friday on the Michigan Insider. And every Friday on the Michigan Insider, we have our strategy preview segment with our guy, Joe Simon, the Silver Fox. The Silver Fox. Every Saturday, he helps us kick off our final hour of this show. Good morning, Joe Simon. How are you?
Good to be with you guys. Going to be an interesting Saturday.
It most definitely is. And we say this all the time on our pregame show, this season at least. If you're watching on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, or on WTK.com/countdown, you get highly entertained during the breaks. We got a message just now from Chris Brown. So this is what goes on during commercials. That's exactly right. We have a lot of fun during the breaks, and you can watch the commercial breaks on our Ticket TV feed. And we were having a lot of fun, I would say, with our friend Joe Simon, the Silver Fox. So, Joe, always great to have you on the show. We always love talking to you, whether it's football, law. Obviously, we talk a lot of law with you, but just in general, we always have a great time.
Hey, the Silver Fox commercial that we played, he got the name in much the same way. He was walking through the building, and Bonnie, she was not even in the back. She was like, Silver Fox. That's exactly how it was. Sorry, Bonnie, if I wasn't supposed to tell that story. But that's exactly how it went. Who's the Silver Fox? Is how she said. I'm sorry, Joe. Not to go off on a tangent, man.
I don't think I'll ever live it down, but okay. Here we go.
You have a brand now, and of course, your real brand is the MichiganDefenders.com. That's the MichiganDefenders.com. But as we said, every Friday we do a strategy breakdown. We break down film, and we get real deep into the X's and O's. And on Saturday, it's more of a little bit more of a macro conversation about what we're expecting to see, keys to the game, that kind of thing. So, Joe, start us off. What are you looking for in the game today?
So we got to talk about defense first. I know you guys have been talking about that, and we'll go general and then get specific. They've got to keep the entire game in front of them. That's the goal for the defense today. That's the general. How do we do that specifically? Well, first of all, I think Hawkins has to have a much better game today than he did last week, him in particular. But number two, we're going to have to do things to protect ourselves. I think we're going to have to walk back our Viper. I don't think we're going to see our Viper pre-snap anyway, where the Viper's been positioned so far this season. I think we're going to have to rely on our 4 down linemen for pressure. It may not be great, but just like you all were saying earlier, we're going to have to give something up to keep the game in front of us. And then we're going to have to see what happens underneath. So if we do have our cover 2, cover 3, if we back the game up and keep the game in front of us, that leaves seams open, that leaves crossing routes open, but at least that keeps the game in front of us. We have to understand that field goals are defensive wins today. And I think that's really going to be the key, especially the last comment, Sam, before we talked about this yesterday a little bit. I didn't see much disguise coverage last week. I mentioned yesterday in our breakdown that I thought Lombardi had the read post-snap that he had pre-snap. Can't have that today. Cannot have that today.
Yeah, I mean, one of the plays you showed that you broke down really, really well was that he audible. He audible to a zone left, and you saw to your point, poor rotations in the secondary, and you wound up having Brad Hawkins over rotate, and on the snap of the ball after the bust up front, I mean, if Hawkins is in position, it keeps what was like a 40-yard gain down to a 10-yard gain. So, even with what they did do, right there in pre-snap to react to what Michigan State was doing, even that was off. So all that needs to be tightened up, to your point, Joe.
I also think our linebacker play is going to be essential here. Look, this is a good screen team, particularly wide receiver screen. They like draws. They like quarterback draw a lot. Penix can run. Let's not forget that. And I don't think our linebackers should be bringing pressure except and exclusively if no one's home, if no one's crossing, bring someone on a delayed blitz. Well, again, the mentality of keeping things in front of you. We are going to give things up. I think we're going to have some matchup problems with crossing routes, but nevertheless, I think that has to be the general philosophy. And then on going over to offense,
real quick, before I want to jump into the linebackers. First of all, I think what you're describing is that bend but don't break defense, which we'll dig into a little bit more. But Sam, we got a message from David who is asking about Cam McGrone and Michael Barrett, and that's obviously an injury concern. Since Joe's talking about the linebackers here, it's probably a good time to bring up that we don't know necessarily the status of those two guys, and those are two key players for the defense.
I'm waiting for some reports out of Bloomington this morning, but I know that Cam, for instance, tried to get back in the game last week, and I was told the ref wouldn't let him back in the game. So that makes me that gives me some optimism about his availability today. I think where I'm less optimistic is when you talk about the offensive line. I think that this is, again, it's not a report, but I think Michigan's going to be down a couple of offensive linemen today. We'll be able to get to that in a bit.
So, Sam, from a coaching perspective, let's jump to offense. If you have those replacements on the offensive line, you have younger guys, you got to know as a coach, what do they do well? And that's the game you have to call. Does that mean they have to release the ball early and you have to have a more correct strike game because they can't hold blocks? They don't do that very well? I don't know. I'm not there every day. But that's where the offensive game planning comes. Does that mean that you're going to run to a particular place? We were talking yesterday about concepts, different blocking concepts. Are they better at gap blocking for the duo play? Are they better at zone blocking? These are the things that we don't know, but that's what, from a coaching perspective, what do they do well? I want to say one thing about their corners. We've been talking about our corners vulnerability. Indiana's corners gave up a lot in the 2 games we've seen. They've given up a lot of deep balls, even against Rutgers. The question for me on the offensive line is, will we have enough pass pro to make use of the deep ball today?
Yeah, I sort of previewed in one of the breaks what I think the offensive line will look like if injuries wind up keeping a couple of guys out. We know Jalen Mayfield. We saw him get rolled up last week. We know that Ryan Hayes was hobbled a bit in last week's game. I wonder if that was one of the reasons. He had a big stumble on a play that would have been a big play, and I wonder if that was one of the reasons why. I don't know that. But if those guys are out, I think you're talking about Stuber kicking out to right tackle, Barnhart at left tackle, and then freshman Zach Zinner who is a physical freak, but he is a freshman. Joe, to your point, I think you would see him at right guard, and it raises a great point, Steve. You got to coach who you got, right? So what do they do in figuring that out? Because everyone has to deal with someone being out these days, right? How figure out how to win is really the charge with coaching. You aren't allowed to say, "Oh, well, I didn't have my guys." Everyone is down guys these days. So we'll see how they fare.
Joe brings up a very interesting discussion point about playing to your strengths or playing against the other team's weaknesses. You have a very set and defined schedule of what you can practice. It gets tighter and tighter and tighter. Gone are the days where you can practice 4 hours a day and work on everything. So you have to decide, are you going to look at the Michigan State game and say, look, 5 of our 6 guys who are key in this offensive play did their jobs. 1 guy didn't. We need to take our time and budget our practice to make all 6 work, or all whatever number work, because it's going to be a position of strength. Or do you look at the other team and say, well, they don't do this very well, but neither do we. And do we practice that to try to make that better to offset that margin? It's a personal choice that one has to make. But I understand whatever choice they decide to go with. Again, I think in the Michigan situation, they try to perfect their strength and take it from there.
Joe, what else do you have for us this morning?
Well, I won't say this game is quote unquote brand defining, because that's an overstatement. But last week, the brand took a big hit, and questions on coaching and longevity of the coaching staff, et cetera, all abound. So today is maybe, forget the record and the streak of wins over Indiana, maybe one of the most program-defining games for Harbaugh. They need to play on a level that we have not yet seen on the road against a ranked opponent. They're depleted. Can they do it? Sure, I think they can. More importantly, they must do it, in my view.
Do you have a score prediction for today?
No, I don't. I don't.
I don't blame you, Joe. It's Steve's prediction is drinking, so I get that. Before we let you go, we got a message from Rick Simon who says Martin Sheen often attends our church. We'll have to tease him about stealing Brother Joe's nickname. There you go, Silver Fox. Your brother Rick Payne watching out there on the West Coast.
Joe, I got to ask you this. Please do us a favor sometime, because of the ever-increasing popular segment that you have on Fridays with Sam and Ira, and the ever-increasing popular video segment, that the day in voir dire jury selection, when the judge asks, do you recognize anybody in the court? And somebody says, I don't know him personally, but I am familiar with the Silver Fox. That needs to be reported first here on Sports Talk 1050 WTKA.
Steve, that already kind of happened. we didn't quite get to the jury selection because we resolved the case, but what they call the veneer, the jurors coming into the courtroom for selection, that actually kind of happened. Somebody, when we resolved the case, as I was going to pack my bag, who was in the jury pool said, hey, Joe, what's going to be happening this weekend on the game? And
so that could eliminate someone from a jury, right? In theory. In theory. Interesting.
What I do.
All right, before we get out of here, Joe, tell everybody about the law offices of Joseph A. Simon.
Yeah, you can find us at the MichiganDefenders.com. We're located right across the street from Michigan Football Stadium, primarily Washtenaw County, all surrounding counties. All criminal defense need misdemeanor to felony, nothing too small, nothing too big. This is our great distraction and our great pleasure to be. I'm so thrilled to be able to do this with you all, but that's my passion. That's my day job. And let's just hope that the film is a little bit more palatable this week.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate your time as always. We will talk to you on Friday and Saturday as well. Enjoy the game, and hopefully we have a game to talk about next Saturday. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.
Right.
It is now time for This Week in Michigan Football History. Here is our guy, Greg Dooley.
This week in Michigan football history.
Good morning, Michigan fans. Today we head back 39 years to this day in 1981 when General Bo George Patton Schembechler's number 12 ranked Wolverines welcomed the University of Illinois. Normally, a crisp fall Saturday in Ann Arbor is met with great joy, but on this day there was a somber mood in town. This was the first game since the passing of iconic Michigan radio voice Bob Ufer. Weeks earlier, Ufer was honored by the student athletes when the coveted Go Blue banner was redesigned to bear his name. The Michigan marching band joined the tribute, forming his name Ufer on Canham's carpet. But as certainly the iconic Ufer would have understood, there was business at hand on the gridiron, and this was a big one. You see, Bo did not care for the opponent on November 7th, 1981. The Illini had fired his friend, Gary Moeller, in 1979, and Bo didn't think Mo got a fair shake in Champaign. On top of this, Schembechler didn't like anything about the man who replaced Mo, namely Illinois' new head coach, Mike White. Bo felt strongly that White used shady recruiting practices, a feeling justified when in 1984 the NCAA slapped Illinois with a 2-year probation. But Coach White and all-conference QB Tony Eason stunned the 105,000 on hand by jumping out to a 21-7 first quarter Illini lead. At that moment, Bo glared at his men, and then over at the eastern sideline, and unleashed the hounds. Michigan proceeded to drop 9 touchdowns on the stunned Illini, enough to make Coach White wince. While Bo was not known to pile on teams, rest assured the gas pedal was pressed firmly down until the final whistle. Anthony, the human torpedo Carter, had 6 catches for 154 yards and a pair of TDs, and the Wolverines amassed over 400 yards on the ground in the beating. When it was all said and done, Michigan had hung 70 on Mike White. Somewhere up in football's Valhalla, old Youth certainly smiled as he relentlessly squeezed the George Patton scoring horn after each of his beloved Michigan's 10 touchdowns. We still miss you, Youth, so go blue, beat the Hoosiers, and for more, check out mvictors.com and WTKA.com. For the Key Bank Countdown to Kickoff, this is Greg Dooley.
Listen after the game for the Retirement Income Solutions Locker Room Wrap-Up Show for the Gem of the Game, brought to you by Lewis Jewelers on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket and on Ticket TV. Coming up next, we hear from head coach Jim Harbaugh, so stay with us. This is the Key Bank Countdown to Kickoff on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket and on Ticket TV.
What's going to happen on defense, man? I wish we knew. I wish we knew. I'm serious. That wasn't just Steve offering that up, for broadcast. I truly don't know if he can call another game. If he will call another game. If he will dial back the aggression to the level that might be necessary to prevent big plays. I truly don't know. So I wish I could tell you what was going to happen defensively. But that's a wild card. That's a true wild card.
Say that again. Who may be calling that thing?
Someone said, "What's going to happen on defense today?" And I said, "I don't know."
But I thought you said something about Don Brown calling his last game, or did I miss that?
No, no, you didn't miss it. I said I don't know if he can call a different kind of game.
I got it. Okay. I did hear it wrong. I'm like, if things don't work out, Don Brown's not calling plays anymore. I'm like, what?
No. No.
I was living under a rock if I missed that one.
Yeah. You know what? A couple of things. Les brings up a great point. Roman Wilson has basically caught everything thrown to him. He was missed on a huge play last week in the flat. The one you guys might remember, the one where Joe Klatt was like, hey, he gets sacked, and Joe Klatt says, that's just great defense by Michigan State. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about, dude? Roman Wilson was wide open in the flat, and he's going to run for 15, 20 yards if Joe hits him. I think they need to look for Roman, man. Look for Roman a little more. Give it to Hassan a little more. Hassan Haskins, he's not the fastest guy they have. Not the best receiving back they have, but pure runner with vision, power, and wiggle. I think they got to get the ball in that guy's hands a little more. So
let me tell people a broadcasting secret. A lot of color commentators don't see everything on the fly either. And when something happens, there's the automatic cliched response as to why a result happened.
Right.
I think Trevor Klatt's pretty smart, and but in some particular instances, they just assume this is why it happened, so you say why it happened, and then Sam goes on film and goes,
"Well, I find it to be the Tony Romoization of commentary." And like, dude, he is so spot on with his analysis on the fly. Other guys try to do it, and they just aren't.
I can't remember who it was. I worked once in the broadcast booth on the Big Ten Network, but it was a decade ago. There was a guy who was always on the desk during the week, but then he would actually do games, and he would literally during a break tell the producers what replay to go to and why, and then he hadn't seen it yet, but it's like, that's what I thought. And then they come back from the break and they go to the telestrator and he would show it. I was just so impressed. I can't remember his name. I can't remember his name, Sam, but he used to be a staple on the Big Ten Network broadcast games. I can't remember. Maybe somebody will help me out.
All right, guys, back in radio in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Win the ultimate Bud Light Victor's Lounge tailgate at home package, courtesy of our friends at Bud Light. It's easy. Just go to WTKA.com/countdown, and maybe you're there right now watching us on the feed. Click for your chance to win the ultimate Bud Light Victor's Lounge tailgate at home package while you were there. That's at WTKA.com/countdown, courtesy of our friends at Bud Light and your friends here at Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket. This is the KeyBank Countdown to Kickoff. We're brought to you by KeyBank, powered by Bud Light, driven by Brighton Ford, and supported locally by Wolverine Rental. And now it's time of the show to hear what the coach had to say. We've got 3 cuts for you that Jim Harbaugh from his press conference earlier this week, and 3 things that I'm sure our guys have comments to respond to what he had to say. So the first one, here is Jim Harbaugh talking about not finishing drives.
The big thing was, we were in rhythm at times and picking up, I think 28 first downs in the game, which is a lot in any football game. And then, your rhythm, you're in a drive, you're moving the ball, and then you get stopped. We got stopped a few times, on their side of the 50, and weren't able to. Too many drives without getting any points from the drive. 12 drives and not enough points per drive. And a lot of that was a lot of second and longs, second and 15, second and 17s. Too many of those, and then early in the game, because of a lot of those second and longs, we weren't able to convert to third downs. Ended up, I think 7 of 15 on third down, but I think early in the game, especially the first half, we 1 for 6, 2 for 8 on third down, and a lot of that was due to the long second and down situations that we were in.
So, guys, 2 different things in there. One is the not finishing the drives and punching it in, and we've spent a lot of time talking about at least one of those drives this week, Sam. But the other part of it is that being in second and long, creating third and long. What are those maybe the potential fixes for that today?
Unfortunately, it's gonna sound overly simplistic, but they put themselves in a hole several times on first down with huge missed assignments. So I think Steve raised a very, very good point, or maybe it was Joe. Maybe they both made the same point when they talked about how you have to, maybe it's about offensive refinement to a certain extent. When you have the number of missed assignments that they had last week, are you trying to do too much? Do you need to focus on a few things and get really, really good at those? And just so you know that you can count on the execution of these plays. If you get beat on them, it's because the opponent beat you and not because you beat yourself. I think that there had to have been a healthy amount of soul searching in that regard, based on just a huge drop off in execution. The flip side of that, Steve, is they did all those things so well against Minnesota. So, you ask yourself, is it just a matter of sticking to what we've been doing and knowing that if we stick to it, we're going to get to the level that we executed against Minnesota? Or do you maybe there's some sort of happy medium where you pare it down a little bit just to make sure that you can have a level of execution that you can count on a little bit more than you were able to count on last week?
So, Sam, I'm theoretically just throwing up a number of 6. That maybe it takes 6 key blocks plays by an individual to make a play go really well. And they get 5. The 6th one caused the tackle for a loss. Maybe you could put out the theory that because Michigan did it so well, without flaws, without mistakes against Minnesota, it led to the stubbornness of continuing to try running the same plays that didn't work against Michigan State, because it worked against Minnesota. If this guy would just do this would be fine. And then that's what, when the offense comes off the field and they're on the phones with the coaches, they're like, hey, do that. That kind of thing. It's like, all right, now let's go out there and run it again. I've done that as again, Pee Wee squirt coach. I think I got a play that works. It can't be stopped. But, somebody made a mistake. So I go back in the huddle and it says, let's run the same play, but you do this. And then somebody else does something different and it causes the play to blow up. And then I get too stubborn because I think I'm a genius. I keep running it. And maybe that was a part of the problem, that it was so successful at Minnesota that it should be successful against Michigan State. And the reason why they got in second down distance is because they were predictably running plays that didn't work. What made me scratch my head quite a bit was there were certain plays that were working against Minnesota that were working just fine against Michigan State as well, but refused to go to them. And to me, those were the isolation plays to players between the numbers and the sideline short of the field. They would always find somebody who could. You take Blake Corum's first touchdown run, and he stretched that around between the numbers into the sideline, and it worked for an 8-yard touchdown where he went untouched. There were plays where A.J. Henning got a clear vision around that side of the field, and the same thing for Roman Wilson. So I would have liked to have seen more of that on first down when the other wasn't working.
All right, guys, here's our second cut from Jim Harbaugh. Here is Jim Harbaugh talking about the Indiana Hoosiers.
Play really good. That's it comes down to that every week. I mean, you gotta play good to win these games. Everybody's got a good team, so you got to play well to win. And getting back to work. Coach is putting in a really good game plan. Players understanding it, and then they can go out in the moment and go for it when they have as good as understanding as they can of that game plan, and you practice it, and then understand it's going to be a tough game. Indiana's really good, but we play good. We play the way we're capable, then we'll be tough to beat as well.
And we have a little more now coming up from Jim Harbaugh. Here is Jim Harbaugh a little bit more on what Indiana does well.
They do a lot of things really well. Defensively, multiple looks. Offensively, very good quarterback, very good receivers, really good running back. Very physical team. Very fired up team. I mean, all the things that we've seen from Indiana year in and year out. I mean, Tom Allen does a great job coaching the team, and it's an exciting ball club, and they got Tom's really got them playing well.
Steve, that's a coach speak version, a short coach speak version of what you spoke to us about the previous hour about the Indiana Hoosiers, but a very talented squad, needless to say, that Michigan's going up to face. And he talked about it, very multiple. They show a lot of different things.
We know a lot about their offense, their ability to throw it down the field, and Stevie Scott, one of the best running backs in the Big Ten. Defensively, they got guys who make plays. They're going to give up some yards on occasion, but they make plays. They force fumbles. As I said, I think they're second interceptions in the league to Northwestern, with 5. They get tackles for a loss. Their secondary is their strength. Yeah, it's going to be a challenge for Michigan.
Yeah, I look at it, and this might be very, very difficult to do, especially if they are down some personnel on the offensive line. But I think they got to build in a couple of shot plays just to keep Indiana, honest. Ideally, you hit those, right? And that makes them respect it. But you got to get them thinking that they're going to try to hit us over the top. And Michigan State didn't even think they never thought as they got deeper in the game. Early in the game, they were playing safety super, super deep. But as the game went on, you just saw the field just get more and more compressed. And I feel like that is the tact that Indiana will take this week. And Michigan's going to have to back them off. They're going to have to, throw a fade or two, at least to get them thinking about it. We'll see if they do it.
Listen after the game for the Retirement Income Solutions Locker Room Wrap-Up Show, brought to you by Retirement Income Solutions and presented by Alta Equipment Company. You hear it on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket, and you watch it on Ticket TV. We're getting close. Michigan versus Indiana is coming up just afternoon from Bloomington, Indiana. Beautiful day forecasted down there. Sunny. 70 should be a great day to watch football on our TVs. And, of course, great weather for them to play the game down there in Bloomington, Indiana. Up next, we're talking key matchups in this contest. So stay with us. This is the Key Bank Countdown to Kickoff live from Saline, Ypsilanti, and Ann Arbor on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket and on Ticket TV.
Clear.
Let me see.
Is that any better, Miz?
A little bit better, yeah.
It seemed like it refocused while I was doing the, during the last segment. All of a sudden, it's like kind of...
What? What?
I don't know.
Who's
what
here?
Fred Murray.
Who's here?
There you go, Sam. That's kind of the point that you said anyways. You got to put a lot of points on the board.
Yeah, they got to put points on the board.
I mean, even if it's not broken, even if your defense isn't broken, you still need to put a lot of points on the board in modern college football. But your point is the defense is a little broken. So yes, unless your point is taken.
Yeah, I think that's where we are in college football. Certainly where we are here. I'm looking for an update. Looking for updates out of Bloomington right now about the updates, but nothing so far.
Yeah, I mean, you're still an hour and a half before a kick, so I don't know how many people are actually out on the field yet, and that's when we first start getting our initial information.
How long is the drive from Detroit to, or from Saline to Detroit to Greek Casino or MGM or?
You could be there in 40. You could be there before kick.
I leave now.
You could be there before kick.
But you try to place a bet on the game, Steve?
Over under.
Find your offensive line news disturbing.
Yeah. Hey, those are the breaks. Not literally. There were no breaks, but. Them's the break.
David, you're not the only one. I know Tim in Three Rivers, if he's watching out there, I know Tim wants to see Roman break one too. I think we all do. He's like right there on the
everything thrown to him.
Yep.
Roman, AJ Henning, and Cornelius Johnson are guys right now that I look at and I'm like, man, those are the guys that have seemingly kind of flashed the most to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Over these first couple of games.
Well, Sam, do you disagree with me on that? On the numbers, the sideline thing short? It just seems like some of Michigan's speed and space is most characterized by getting them outside, even if it's not down the field, just short way through the field. They seem to have a lot of space and a lot of room to run if they can get by one guy, and they have the talent to do that.
Yeah, they missed some of those opportunities last week too. Unfortunately, I didn't see any bubbles. But just perimeter passes that could have worked. Could have been some of those space plays that.
Well, Joe missed one that was wide open out in the flat because he was looking on the other side of the field. But were there times where they weren't executing it? Like those players weren't executing it, or?
I can think of two that he just flat missed. I don't think they called. And I asked Al about. A couple of bubble opportunities that I thought I saw, and he said that you don't throw that. And he said that especially he saw a lot of man, and he said that you don't want to be whether it's RPOs or some of the things that we saw them do against Minnesota, some of that stuff wasn't there. Some of that short stuff wasn't there. Michigan State was taking it away. And in order to loosen them up, to get them in the zone posture, you're going to have to maybe
standing by
to loosen them up.
We see you, Walt. Happy to be here for you, buddy.
Mm-hmm. All right, guys, back on radio in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome back to the KeyBank Countdown and Kickoff on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket and on Ticket TV. Brought to you by KeyBank, powered by Bud Light, driven by Brighton Ford, and supported locally by Wolverine Rental. Before we get to key matchups in today's game, I know, Sam, you're waiting for an update from Bloomington and what's who's on the field, et cetera, and we're hoping to get that before we get to the end of our show. But how about an update from Madison, Wisconsin, where Michigan's next opponent, Wisconsin, is not playing Purdue today. But Adam Rittenberg from ESPN was the first of these reports to come out. A few others have had it as well. But according from Wisconsin, the team began limited on-field conditioning yesterday and continued today. There have been 2 positive tests, 1 athlete, 1 staff member in the last 4 days. They currently have 14 active cases, 9 players, 5 staff, with 5 positive results in the past 7 days. So the numbers are coming down. All meetings are taking place virtually, and Wisconsin is using additional space for locker room at another building on campus. The next update is going to come on Monday. And so that obviously the update that we're going to get on Monday is going to be the big one that's going to announce whether or not there's going to be a game on Saturday night, Michigan-Wisconsin, scheduled for 7:30 a week from tonight at Michigan Stadium. And I know I see Sam's reaction on the video screen. I assume Steve's kind of feeling the same way. Guys, I'm not very optimistic about a Michigan-Wisconsin game next Saturday.
Well, look, man, I just know how I would feel if I was a player or a coach or a parent, certainly a parent of a player on that team. Or Michigan's team. Look, let's take competition out of it first. I've been talking about this out of sequence. The biggest concern is about the health and welfare of the people in Wisconsin's program.
Amen.
I mean, we said at the very beginning, when the season started, we sat on the show and we said, look, there's no way the Big Ten is going to make it through this season unscathed. They're going to have some postponement, some cancellation. Some players are gonna miss meaningful snaps. Big time players gonna miss meaningful snaps. Those things are gonna happen. And we said the likeliest place for it to occur is Wisconsin. It's the hottest state in the country. Now the entire country is seemingly hot now when it comes to COVID. I think there was a record for new cases yesterday of over 100,000, like 120,000 or something like that. So the whole country is hot, but Wisconsin especially. I mean, it is just. It's like a petri dish, seemingly there. Wisconsin had already shut down, Steve. So it was seemingly, to me, inevitable that they were going to have an issue. And here we sit. They had 27 cases. The cases are coming down, and they're hoping to have enough players healthy to be able to play this game next week. And I just find myself getting back to the competition side of it, thinking, man, if I'm a parent, a week removed from that program having 27 cases, I almost don't care, what kind of clearance they get to. If they get it down to like 12 cases, I'm still nervous about that, Steve, if I'm a parent, a coach, or a player on Michigan's team.
Sure. Now, I think it might be a bit of the opposite, and I'll tell you why. The way the Big Ten rules are set up, that if Wisconsin wants to win the Western Division, they can't have 3 fewer games.
I know.
Than the rest of the West. Something that I'm surprised hasn't been bulletin board material already or talked a lot about is that Paul Chryst last week said, based on our COVID situation and personnel is out, we can still beat Michigan. And he said it with confidence. So he's painting a picture that the players that have it aren't necessarily, your first teamers or your best players or anything like that.
I mean, his starting quarterback has it.
Well, yeah, but he's also going to be eligible to play again.
His 22nd day is the Michigan game.
Right.
Yes.
So he could be playing. We know that it seems to be half staff, half players. The staff doesn't have they don't have to sit out as long as the players do. It was Wisconsin's choice to sit out Nebraska. I think if they were given a choice to play Michigan, I think with everything that's on the line for Wisconsin's football season and their players, if it's given a choice, we'll play in that Michigan game. And Paul Chryst is saying, based on our personnel, we got this game won. So I think again, hinging on the prefaces that they have a choice, they will play this game in Michigan, and Michigan will see Wisconsin as a COVID ravaged team coming in that they should trounce. And I don't think that's going to be the case either.
See, but I guess I'm talking about this from a totally different vantage point. I'm not even talking about how competitive they could be or whether they can win. I'm talking about from a health and risk standpoint. Sure. I would be nervous saying, man, they just had 27 cases last week. And we're talking, can they get that down to an acceptable sort of level to be able to come out and compete when, man, you're thinking, all right, they're testing, there's some guardrails there, but boy, I'm nervous about the presence of COVID on that team. What if Michigan were to say, and I'm not saying that Michigan is going to say this, I doubt they will, but if I were a parent, I'd say, hey, I don't know that we should play them. Like, what if we don't want to play? Sure, they have cleared these benchmarks, but what if we say we're too nervous to get out there and play against that team? Then what, Steve?
I brought this very same question with you on Wednesday. Michigan could be the team that decides to opt out in this one. It would be a different circumstance because COVID hasn't hit their campus. But to say we don't want to play this game because we don't want COVID coming to our town or to our campus, that is a possibility. How much of it is a possibility? I really don't know. I haven't asked the question. I think that's something that should be asked on Monday.
Yeah, COVID has hit the Michigan campus, by the way.
But you know what I mean.
But not the athletic side of it like it has at Wisconsin. There's no question about it. The other thing to keep in mind for Wisconsin is that unless there's a major slew of cancellations, in particular in the Big Ten West, Wisconsin cannot miss another game and be eligible for Indianapolis. They have to play a minimum 6 games according to the rules put in place for this year, unless the average number of games played by everybody in the West dips lower than what it is. And it would take a lot of cancellations to change this. So Wisconsin, they're going to try to find a way to play, but it does bring up questions. And so on Monday, we're going to be paying attention, I'm guessing, on Tuesday. And then, of course, Steve, with you, when you join us on Wednesday for the midweek peak, we'll talk more about that as well.
They announced Tuesday, Barry Alvarez announced Tuesday the cancellation of this Purdue game. It could be as late as Tuesday about whether you hear there's going to be a Michigan game or not.
Correct. All right, guys, let's get to the key matchups of this game today. Michigan versus Indiana. Michigan's offense versus Indiana's defense. We'll start with you, Sam Webb.
This is easy. Offensive line, defensive line, man. Michigan's offensive line. And what I expect to be an injury-depleted group. And here's the thing. Think about this. Think about it coming out of that game against Michigan State, Steve, where maybe you looked at it and you said, all right, I might need to have some competition intensify at this spot or that spot. I might want to swap a guy out based on competition this week. Then you get in practice, you realize, wait, I might be down a couple of starters, which is what I think is going to be the case for Michigan today. Now you're hamstrung a little bit about maybe taking some other guys out of the lineup that you maybe were thinking about moving around based on competition. You can ill afford to do that because you want a little bit of experience out there. How do I expect for it to play out? I said this earlier in the show. I think, again, not a report, I think you're going to see Andrew Stuber at right tackle today. I think you're going to see Carson Barnhart at left tackle today. I think you're going to see Zach Zinner at right guard today. That certainly limits your ability to maybe shuffle at some other positions because you just can't afford to throw even more inexperience on the football field if you're going to go with true freshman Zach Zinner and redshirt freshman Carson Barnhart in there as well. 2 very, very talented athletes, maybe the most talented athletes in the room, 2 of the 3 most talented athletes in the room, but inexperienced, Steve. That makes this a major, major matchup for Michigan.
And if that's the case, then Michigan should not be favored in this game. They should be an underdog in this game. And if you're replacing that many offensive linemen for a bunch of first-time guys coming in or second-time guys or inexperienced guys coming in, they come and win in Bloomington in this one, then it changes the narrative a bit for Michigan, and it's something that they sorely need. Michigan's got to be able to figure out if they can pass down the field and make Indiana's defense play honest, as you say, Sam. That is what you commented earlier on in this program. I completely agree with that. And the running backs got to be able to do their thing, but most importantly, the offensive line has got to be able to do their thing, and they're going to be doing it with different people.
Anything else to add on the key matchup, Steve? Michigan's offense versus Indiana's defense before we flip to the other side of the ball?
Just that I know that the Indiana defense, the secondary is their strength, and that is where they make their hay. It's not up front, it's in the back. And they got some guys who can, turn the ball over on you. And depending on where it is, I think a turnover costs you 4 points. You're generally, if you turn the ball over deep in your own territory, it's going to cost you. If you turn over the ball deep in their territory, it costs you for not scoring in an opportunity in which you should have. So, I mean, turnovers to me are at least an average of 4 points in this one. Indiana's forcing takeaways. Second in the league in interceptions, third in the conference, I believe, in takeaway margin in general. So that's a matchup to look out for.
And then, Steve, let's go to the other side of the ball. Key matchup in today's game, Michigan's defense versus Indiana's offense.
Same thing I said last week against Michigan State. I talked about it then, was the wide receivers of the opponent versus Michigan secondary and one-on-one matchups. The same is going to be held true today. Sam can't disagree with me on that one whatsoever. And I hate to steal his thunder on it because, he's just as passionate about as I am about how important that matchup is on that particular side of the ball.
It's huge. It's huge. I mean, you might want to throw Don Brown versus Nick Sheridan as a major matchup, because if you're Nick Sheridan, you gotta come on, man. I mean, this is a copycat game, a copycat league, fresh video, and Michigan had no answer in that game. So you got to come in this game if you're Nick Sheridan saying you're going to take your shots. And so if you're Don Brown, you got to know that. Now, how do you respond? Is it you just bring more pressure and hope for the best, or do you soften things up on the back end? So it's, as much as we can talk about the on the field wide receiver versus DB, strategically, what is the strategic response to this? Is a big question for me in this game.
One of the things that I think was huge in the Minnesota game was the play of Aiden Hutchinson, not necessarily putting the hands on the quarterback of Tanner Morgan, but altering the throws of Tanner Morgan. His reach at 6'7", at height, but then he's got a much bigger reach than that, was able to alter throws that Tanner Morgan was throwing. Maybe he has to penetrate. So does Kwity Paye. They got to be able to penetrate, to alter the throws and the trajectories of Penix's throws to give the cornerbacks a chance.
Coming up next, we wrap up the show with one sure thing, and the guys will give you their score predictions and more on today's game. Stay with us. This is the KeyBank Countdown to Kickoff, live from Saline, Ypsilanti, and Ann Arbor, and here on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket and on Ticket TV.
Clear.
Got a team.
This is funny. So I looked. So yeah, in a couple of weeks, Northwestern plays Wisconsin in a couple of weeks. Northwestern could be like, yeah, we don't want to be, that game shouldn't be played.
Absolutely.
And then Wisconsin would be eliminated from
and look,
the race by that.
I wasn't saying it for that reason. I wasn't saying from you think you're gonna lose. So
you weren't talking a game purpose at all. Your answer had nothing to do with football itself, right?
Yeah. So it's gotta be.
Northwestern's paying Michigan to throw the, to cancel the game. What can we give you? Can we give you a draft?
Well, here's a question.
Can we give you a recruit?
So what if Northwestern and Wisconsin are tied going into, Wisconsin needs to win their last game of the season. Can Iowa take some money from Northwestern and cancel their game? Iowa by then probably be done anyway. Could they say, yeah, we're not playing against Wisconsin. They cancel their game and Northwestern then pays them a little money to the table.
The Big Ten will fold. If it gets down to that point,
I'm sure it will. I know.
We're just joking about it. Total aside, Steve. Yeah, we didn't get into it in the pick segment, but let's say that Iowa just circles the drain this year. Will this finally be the time where they start talking about it's time to move on?
Kirk maybe. Hold on, I got to take this call real quick, guys. I'm sorry.
Hi, Ms.
Oh, hi, guys.
Oh, we had a question in here earlier. If you're still watching, there's someone asked, I can't find the question now about, he's like, expect Wisconsin to beat Michigan. We're not, There may not be a game, but we'll find that one out next week. But he said, what's the big game today? Is it Clemson versus Notre Dame? And I think it's actually the Florida-Georgia game more than the Clemson-Notre Dame game because of what Steve talked about earlier this morning, where the loser of the Clemson-Notre Dame game is more than likely going to finish second in the ACC and then play the winner of that game, and they're going to have a rematch.
And Notre Dame's that good, frankly.
Yeah, well, I think Notre Dame. I think that we have a top 3 in the country, like we have for a while, and I think that there's a distinct separation. And you have like Florida, Georgia today trying to play to get into that conversation. But you look at who's 4, 5, 6, 7, and none of them are in the top 3, in the same caliber as the teams the top 3. Notre Dame might not be overrated in the top 10 because there just might be they might be in the same par as everybody 4 through 10. They're just, but
they scored 12 points.
I know. Oh, I know.
In a game this year.
Yeah, so Florida, Georgia. I think Florida, Georgia is the best game today. I'm going to figure out a way. That's why I might set up the post game show outside because I'll have the TV right there and I could just watch the.
Yeah, that's like one of those numbers that's going to stay emblazoned in my mind the rest of the year about how good they are, what their ceiling is as a team.
1 minute, by the way, guys.
1 minute. We see him back, Mr. Clarke.
Yeah, but I'd say the cocktail party's got to be the big game of the weekend. Followed by New Orleans and Tampa Bay.
Let's see. I'm going to see if I can get an update here real quick. Eric Adelson said there's plenty of attention on Michigan and Georgia. No room for error.
Theus is going all right. It's slowly coming in. Stubble's kind of there, but not entirely.
Sheldon Noah's made his debut. He's been in Sam's arms and co-hosted the Michigan Insider for at least a few minutes here and there.
Yeah. All right, gentlemen, we can take this all the way to the top.
All right, Steve. There's a sign at game day for the virtual game that says Notre Dame will win when I can pronounce Uiagalelei, or however you pronounce his last name.
What is it? Can you say that again? See, Uiagalelei. I can't say that.
I need to read it again. But it's like saying ukulele.
DJ Uiagalelei.
Uiagalelei.
Yeah, Michigan. Jim Harbaugh was one of his first offers, by the way.
All right, stand by. Back in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome back to the Key Bank Countdown and Kickoff on Sports Talk 1050, WTK The Ticket, online at WTK.com and online at Ticket TV. We have been brought to you by Key Bank, powered by Bud Light, driven by Brighton Ford, and supported locally by Wolverine Rental. It's now time for One Sure Thing, brought to you by Home Shore Lending. If you're looking for a mortgage and you're a Michigan fan, there's only one place to go, Home Shore Lending. Both fair and honest, Home Shore Lending is local, efficient, and small enough so you'll work directly with the owner, Matt Demarest. Matt's a great guy. You want to work with him? For more information, go to homeshorelending.com. That's homeshorelending.com. And Sam, besides Memorial Stadium having about the typical Memorial Stadium attendance today being a sure thing, what is your actual one sure thing?
All right, well, I guess I'll go get off the ledge here, and I will say that my one sure thing is that Michigan is going to have a new starting 5 along the offensive line. I feel very, very strongly that Jalen Mayfield, I mean, think about even if he could go, Steve, coming off of a return to college football when he was preparing for his, preparing for the draft, preparing for his pro career, that has to weigh and register for him. You got a bigger picture to think about rather than the here and now. You're early in the season, even if you don't want to be dealing with this the rest of the year. I think that you're going to see Michigan down at least him. My one short thing is a new starting 5 along the offensive line. Jalen Mayfield at least. But as I said earlier in the show, I expect for Jalen Mayfield and Ryan Hayes to be out today.
Tough blow for the Michigan offensive line. Update from Bloomington, from Angelique. Jim Harbaugh's back in khakis today, for those that were caring, because they made such a big deal out of it in the Minnesota game. Probably because it's 70 degrees and sunny down there, but that's really besides the point. All right, guys, it's time for game picks. Before we get to that, I had a couple of quick questions I want to throw at you. The first one is, Sam, what's it going to take today to get people drinking again, i.e. you saying dialed in a lot? What's it going to take for you to be talking about being dialed in? Because that's our new drinking game, and people haven't had a drink in about a week.
Yeah, man. Efficiency, execution in the run game. I mean, I expect if we see Michigan hitting on a couple of at least in explosive play in the first half. And why do I say that? Because we saw Michigan hit on a couple of explosive plays early in the Minnesota game on the ground. And there were a handful of opportunities like that against Michigan State, just with proper execution. Just in the law of averages, I think there are going to be some opportunities. It will be a sign to me that they're back to being dialed in if we see a 30-yard run sometime in the first half. Those are the kinds of plays that they left on the football field last week versus Michigan State. Now, a hindrance, Steve, to your earlier point, is if you are going out there with some new offensive linemen, some young offensive linemen, then the odds of some more MAs or some more inefficiency, those odds go up.
Most definitely. I mean, that's some very discouraging news that about the offensive line, because offensively, I thought that's the side of the ball that you can get corrected the most. And here you are going to be throwing multiple players there with possibly your two top tackles not being able to be in to play in the game. It's going to be a really, really tough challenge. But with the challenge comes an opportunity for Michigan to spell out those demons against Michigan State and win a quality game on the road. But boy, it seems like the odds are stacked against them right now, especially on the impact of that news.
If there's one assistant coach, a position group coach that had to go through this, would this be, like, if you had to pick one, I think Ed Warner would be the guy that we have the most confidence in. Still, obviously, nervous anticipation to see what they do. But if there was one group and one coach, based on his track record the last couple of years, we've seen him get his guys ready to play. So we'll see that one plays out. One more question before we get to your picks. Steve Clarke, for you, to get to that, what Sam's talking about, to get the guys dialed in, et cetera, who do you think needs to get more touches than maybe they've had so far this year on the offensive side of the ball?
Oh, more touches. How about Hassan Haskins? Get him some more touches, some power running game. Fall forward, get 3 or 4 yards. Every rush, fall forward, you get 2. Let's see if we can get 3 or 4 and put some second and manageables out there, Sam.
Look, I think that the amount of skill talent that they have is a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing that you have so many guys you believe in that can play, that have the ability to make plays. The curse is when you try to feed them all, you might be lessening or lowering your potential to see it on the football field. And I think that's that tightrope that they're walking. You're trying to feed so many guys. When you look at the way Hassan Haskins ran last week, you can make the case that he deserved more of the carries. So if you got 4 backs and you're going to be running it with Joe, can you have that many guys running the football and impact the game, have your running game impact the game as explosively as you want it to? In game 1, they achieved that. In game 2, that just wasn't there. Now, that wasn't all about the running backs. That was about a lot of it was due to the blocking, but still, it's a real question, Steven. I'm with you. Hassan Haskins, feed him more.
All right, guys, it's time for your game picks. Sam Webb.
I'm gonna say that you watched them or I heard about them in fall camp have problems protecting the quarterback at times, and they were able to deal with it. Quick game. They were still able to run the football effectively. That has me believing that the execution issues, while maybe a little more present with some new members of the offensive line, that they aren't going to be as bad as they were against Michigan State. I think I respect Indiana. I think they're going to score some points. I got Michigan winning this game in the 30s. Steve Clarke, I'm going to go Michigan 37, Indiana 33.
I had Michigan winning this game until Sam delivered me the bad news. It's like a lump of coal in my stocking. I know we're a couple of months away from Christmas, but that's what it feels like right now. And I'm really worried about overreacting on the news. There's a real reaction and there's an overreaction. I'm worried I'm overreacting, but I needed this offense to be able to keep up with the defense. New offensive line suggests that may not happen. I'm going to actually now take Indiana to win this game, 31-24.
That's the only game you guys picked differently all day today. And just a shout out to the Pac-12. Welcome to the college football season today. Although 4 of their teams will not be playing out of the Pac-12, but they will. The other teams will be playing, and so everybody's in action now. The Mac's in action, and everybody else is as well. So there is that. Thank you to everybody, in particular game day producer Matt the Miz Mizler back inside the MDN studios. Our guys, Joe Simon and Greg Dooley. My guys, Sam Webb and Steve Clarke. And, of course, all of you for listening to today's show. Don't forget to go to WTK.com/countdown to enter for your chance to win the ultimate Bud Light Victor's Lounge tailgated home package, courtesy of our friends at Bud Light. In about an hour from Bloomington, it's Michigan versus Indiana. The Wolverines need a great bounce-back performance this afternoon to knock off the ranked Hoosiers. After the game, join me for the Retirement Income Solutions Locker Room Wrap-Up Show presented by Alta Equipment Company right here on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket and on Ticket TV. Now it's time for coverage from the Michigan Sports Network. Enjoy the game, everybody, and as always, go Blue.
You guys are clear.
Bye, everybody. Enjoy the game. Go Blue.
See you, YouTubers, Facebook.